Chapter 882. Everyone turned to look at the source of the sound and saw Wuming standing there, his face full of confusion. Wuming had just returned to No Name when he saw the other members of No Name about to go on a long journey. How could he not be confused? "Villo, Mr." The members of No Name screamed as if they had seen a ghost. "What's wrong?" Everyone shouted in unison, causing Wuming to be stunned for a moment. "What the hell happened?" "Mr. Villo, weren't you fighting against Absolute Devil King in the North District?" Black Rabbit's ears twitched, looking confused. "I killed the Devil King, and then I came back." Wuming's tone was very calm, as if he was saying, "I came back after eating." But everyone had different reactions when they heard this. Ren and Black Rabbit were shocked, Restia was proud of Wuming, the three problem children were unhappy, and Pest was indifferent. After that, Wuming shrugged his shoulders and no longer cared about his companions, who he didn't know what they were doing. He walked straight into the interior of No Name. "I'll go back first." Wait a minute, Mr. Villo, that was Absolute Devil, how could you kill him so casually?" Black Rabbit turned around and wanted to chase after Wuming, but because he was too excited, his footsteps were a little shaky. "I didn't kill Absolute Devil casually, I fought with him for a day and a night before I killed him," Wuming replied without turning his head. Although he said that, it still didn't seem like it was difficult for him to kill Absolute Devil King. Furthermore, Reverse 16 Knights was very unhappy. "Not bad, Mr. Villo, you actually took the big prize without anyone noticing," Reverse 16 Knights said as he suddenly jumped up and kicked at Wuming. Clatter, a golden chain suddenly emerged from Silent Cry's clothes like a cold spear. The sharp end of the chain was aimed at 16 Knights, who was trying to turn back. Realizing that the chain was not ordinary, 16 Knights did not choose to fight it head-on. Instead, he changed his movement in mid-air and kicked the chain directly. Bang! The deafening sound of steel colliding rang out, and the airwaves produced by the collision spread out, impacting everyone. This caused Black Rabbit and the others to subconsciously raise their hands to resist the airwaves. At the same time, Wuming's aura changed and a tyrannical aura enveloped everyone present. However, the aura disappeared in an instant and everyone felt as though they were hallucinating. In the next second, the originally rigid chain became like an extremely resilient steel whip, ruthlessly lashing towards 16 Knights who had yet to land on the ground. 16 Knights reacted instantly and kicked the golden chain. With the help of the reaction force of the golden chain, he jumped back into the air and did a 360-degree spin before landing steadily. Everyone looked at Wuming and 16 Knights in a daze. They could not tell whether the terrifying aura just now was an illusion or real. However, because the terrifying aura appeared for less than a tenth of a second, no one could tell whether it was real or an illusion. "You've become stronger, Villo." Reverse 16 Knight's face was filled with an excited smile. He was excited that Wuming, a strong opponent, had become stronger. "Just as you saw, I accidentally found my body, so my strength is naturally different from before." After comforting Enkidu, Wuming put the chain back into his sleeve and turned to look at everyone. "So, Mr. Villo found his body?" "That's great, congratulations." Black Rabbit subconsciously felt happy that Wuming found his body. However, Black Rabbit immediately reacted. "Wait, that's not the point. Don't fight in front of our community." Black Rabbit rushed towards Reverse 16 Knights in a frenzy, trying to subdue this problematic child who started the fight. "Stop, Black Rabbit, I won't fight anymore." However, Reverse 16 Knights stopped Black Rabbit with words. "Villo has become beyond my imagination. I can't beat him now." Reverse 16 Knights shook his head silently. "Huh?" Black Rabbit, who came to Reverse 16 Knights' side, made a strange sound. Reverse 16 Knights, this problematic child, actually admitted that he was not a match for Garen and stopped the fight? Did the sun rise from the west? The truth was not as exaggerated as Black Rabbit thought. It was just that Reverse 16 Knights was more aware of Wuming's strength than the others. When Enkidu helped Wuming block reverse 16 Knight's attack, Wuming subconsciously wanted to fight back. However, he did not control it well and almost used his full strength. After all, Wuming and Az Dakaha were fighting too intensely. During that one day and one night of fighting, although Wuming did not really use his full strength, every move he made was not casual either. It might not be strong for Az Dakaha, but for the people in the middle and lower levels of the community, it was a very strong move. In short, Wuming was used to fighting seriously. When faced with reverse 16 Knight's greeting kick, he almost became serious. However, even so, reverse 16 Knights was still aware of the difference between the two of them. He was no match for Wuming now. Reverse 16 Knights was not someone who did not know when to back down. He still had some self-awareness. Moreover, this was just reverse 16 Knights greeting to Wuming. He did not have any intention of fighting Wuming properly. Even if he did, he would not fight in front of so many people in no name. Therefore, it was impossible for them to fight. Black Rabbit was worrying too much. When I become stronger, let's fight again. Reverse 16 Knights revealed an unruly expression and looked at Wuming with joy and anticipation. No, it's too troublesome. After Wuming finished speaking, he turned around and walked into No Name again. Reverse 16 Knights did not mind and followed Wuming into No Name. After all, if they really wanted to fight, it was not something that could be rejected just because one of them was unwilling. Wait. Wait a minute, Mr. Villo, you have to explain the matter of the Absolute Demon King, Black Rabbit said and immediately chased after Wuming. Let's go everyone, it's time to go back. Letitia said and walked back into No Name. In the end, our anticipation was in vain. Not good. Jiu Yuao and Haruai Hiroyuki looked at each other helplessly and followed Letitia for a while. Ren looked around. Other than himself, only Pest was left. However, before Ren could say anything, Pest snorted coldly and silently walked into No Name. Ren smiled awkwardly and walked into No Name unhurriedly. As the leader of the community, Ren successfully became the last member to enter his community. Chapter 883. In the No Name chat room, everyone sat together and chatted with Wuming. They learned about absolute evil bit by bit from Wuming. So that's how it is. Mr. Villo has experienced quite a lot of things along the way. Black Rabbit pointed at several things that Wuming said. Fighting with the Undying Demon King, fighting with the heroes born in the apocalypse, and finally fighting with the humans in the final trial. I'm jealous. 16 Knights wished he could replace himself with Wuming to experience all that. 16 Knights was excited just by thinking about it. Who knew how happy Wuming, who had experienced all that, would be? But that's only for Villo. If it were us, our lives would be in danger. Joyuan Fei Niao held her teacup and took a sip gracefully. Letitia said, agreeing with Joyuan Fei Niao's words. Yes, Fei Niao is right. Other than Maxwell, whether it's Galji with his another cosmology or absolute evil in the final trial, they are all very strong enemies for you. Even I would have a hard time winning against them. 16 Knights, on the other hand, didn't care. How would I know if I don't try? I have to see it with my own eyes before I comment. The more dangerous the enemy, the more he liked it. After all, they were problem children. I just didn't expect that Galji would have another cosmology. It's really surprising. Ren was quite concerned about Galji, who looked to be the same age as him. By the way, what's this another cosmology? Joyuan Fei Niao raised a question. Oh right, Miss Fei Niao, you guys have just arrived at the box court. I'm afraid you guys don't know about another cosmology. It seemed like Black Rabbit wanted to explain. To put it simply, it contains the powerful gift of cosmology. It can be infinitely magnified to interfere with the powerful forces of the outside world. Every another cosmology is unique, which means that every another cosmology has different abilities. Joyuan Fei Niao nodded thoughtfully. Simply put, it's an extremely powerful gift. You can think of it that way, Miss Flying Bird. However, another cosmology is much more precious and powerful than ordinary gifts. After all, Black Rabbit did not simulate the another cosmology and could not explain it in detail. It could only give Long Flying Bird a general understanding. Wu Ming interjected. It is said that the existence with the simulated cosmic atlas has the potential to become the center of a group of gods. Because of the power of the simulated cosmic atlas, I am afraid that only those with the simulated cosmic atlas can compete with it. Wu Ming recalled how Galji had killed Wu Ming's doppelganger by forcibly activating the simulated another cosmology. It could be said that if it was not Wu Ming's doppelganger that was killed, but the spiritual base body, that blow would have also killed Wu Ming's spiritual base body. Therefore, in Silent's opinion, to fight against that kind of power, unless they also have the simulated cosmology, they can only fight against it without the simulated cosmology. Otherwise, only Silent, the bug, can fight against it without the simulated cosmology. Interesting, a simulation of an alien cosmology. 16 Nights Reversal smiled, but no one knew what he was thinking. However, Black Rabbit was frightened by 16 Nights Reversal's smile. 16 Nights, San, don't think too much. Black Rabbit has a feeling that you will do something. Black Rabbit said as he looked at Zhou Yuan Fei Niao and Haruai Buyao. Really, these problem children were too good at causing trouble. Black Rabbit had to be prepared for a rainy day. Then, Black Rabbit noticed that Haruai Buyao seemed to be thinking about something. Miss Buyao, what's troubling you? Although they were problem children, they were all companions. Black Rabbit was happy to help his companions solve their problems. I'm a bit concerned about the griffin Vilo mentioned. Haruai Buyao hugged Sanmao Cat and said the reason for his deep thoughts. Is it the genome tree on the griffin? Wu Ming guessed the reason for Haruai Buyao's concern. This was something that Wu Ming mentioned before. Yes. Haruai Buyao nodded. The genome tree was a gift from my father, and according to what Vilo said, the genome tree on the griffin seems to be almost complete. In this way, Haruai Buyao had to guess whether the griffin was related to his father. That's easy. Just ask the griffin. Wu Ming said casually. Everyone was shocked. But, Vilo-san, can you find the griffin? Black Rabbit was puzzled. Of course I can. Galji's group is still trapped in my inherent barrier. Wu Ming explained and then looked at everyone innocently. Didn't I say that? You didn't say that. Everyone shouted at Wu Ming in unison. Vilo, I really didn't know that you're actually a natural airhead. 16 Nights crossed her arms and looked at Wu Ming jokingly. Ahem, in short, Galji's group is locked up by me. I didn't have time to hand them over to White Yiksha. If you want to talk to the griffin, I can do it at any time. Everyone looked at Haruai Buyao. Finally, Haruai Buyao looked at Sanmao Cat in his arms and nodded. Nasalix's inherent barrier, 6th layer, forest. When Galji's group was locked up in Nasalix's inherent barrier by Wu Ming in the form of a gift competition, they were all separated. Galji was in the lava area of the 7th layer, Aurora was in the underground lake of the 4th layer, and the unconscious Ling was directly thrown into the wilderness of the 8th layer by Wu Ming. The seriously injured Glea was taken care of by Wu Ming and placed in the forest area of the 6th layer. And it turned out that the griffin could indeed settle down in the forest. Glea, who had woken up from his coma, was lying quietly on the ground at this moment to avoid physical exhaustion. Although it was very weak, Glea's injuries were indeed recovering. In short, it was better than nothing. I wonder how His Highness and the others are doing. Glea muttered to himself. Glea, who had woken up from his serious injuries, saw the contract document in front of him at a glance and knew that he was trapped in a place that was not a forest. I'm afraid it's some kind of personal space. Grove thought. After all, there were many people who had such a space in the box court world. Basically, it was used to hold gift competitions. At this moment, he was obviously trapped in the gift competition, so Grove guessed that this was Wu Ming's personal space. I wonder how His Highness and the others are doing. Grove didn't know if His Highness and the others had escaped, or if they were captured like him. But right now, it was more important to recover from his injuries, so Glea simply lay down here peacefully. However, at this moment, there was a fluctuation in space, and two extremely obvious figures appeared not far away from Glea. Glea couldn't help but be vigilant. Chapter 884. Villo. Glea, whose eyesight was much better than humans, saw the two people walking towards them at a glance. The one in front was Wu Ming. Supporting his body that had not fully recovered but was almost able to fight, Glea stood up, and a fighting spirit emanated from him. Although Glea's wings had not recovered yet, he had enough time to rest, which allowed Glea to have the power to fight. "What, Glea, do you still want to fight me?" Wu Ming, who was walking in front, did not release his aura to intimidate Glea. Instead, he snapped his fingers lightly. In an instant, the ground where Glea was standing cracked slightly, and chains rushed out one after another, throwing all of them onto Glea's body and tightly entangling him. Glea, who did not react in time, instantly fell to the ground because his limbs were all tied up. "Damn it!" Glea raised his head and looked at Wu Ming rather unbearably. "Gaoji and the others are fine, I just locked them up. You should be honest, I don't want to do anything to you, but I will still hand you over to White Yiksha after this." Wu Ming walked in front of Glea and patted his griffin's head. "Up to you." Glea could not beat Wu Ming anyway, and he was now a prisoner, so what could he do? "I came to see you this time because I have a companion who is quite interested in you. You can talk to her," Wu Ming said, and Haruai Hibaku walked past Wu Ming from behind and came to the front. "Hello, Mr. Glea Grove." The quiet girl holding the three-furred cat took the lead to greet him. "Hello, little girl." Grove responded to Wu Ming. Let's not talk about Wu Ming first, at least the little girl in front of him looked pretty good. "I'll leave first, Grove. If you're done talking, knock on the chain, and I'll come and pick you up." Wu Ming had no intention of listening in, so he left after instructing Haruai Hibaku. Haruai Hiroyuki nodded, then looked at Grove again. "My name is Haruai Hibu. Do you know this?" Haruai Hibu said as he took out the pendant hidden in his clothes. Could this be? After leaving the 6th floor, Wu Ming arrived at the 7th floor, which was Gaoji's floor. "Sir Villo, what do you think?" Gaoji, who was sitting on a rock that was colder than other places, immediately stood up when he saw Wu Ming. Wu Ming helped Gaoji find a rock that was not so hot. Gaoji did not need to keep the another cosmology on to prevent the heat. After all, if he accidentally glanced at Wu Ming when the another cosmology was half turned on, it would definitely be uncomfortable. "I haven't done anything to those people yet. It'll take some time, but I'll deal with them in a way that won't put the blame on you or me." After Gaoji told Wu Ming everything he knew about the people behind him, Wu Ming did not immediately make a move on those existences. First of all, Gaoji had never really come into contact with the higher-ups. The people he came into contact with were people who were not at the highest level. At most, they were at a higher level than Gaoji. Even so, Wu Ming was very sure that some of the gods in the upper levels of the box court were behind this. However, because he did not know which gods were behind this, Wu Ming could only make a move on the people Gaoji knew. After finding these people, Wu Ming would slowly dig out the people behind these people. However, these people's whereabouts were always unpredictable. Wu Ming could not find them at the moment, but Wu Ming had a way. After returning to the root, Wu Ming could use the root's authority to find people in the box court. By then, they would not be able to escape. "Oh. What is it?" Gaoji was quite interested in the method Wu Ming had prepared. Not only could he deal with those people, but he could also do it without exposing his identity. However, Wu Ming had no reason to tell Gaoji that it would be the same even if Gaoji's attitude toward him became slightly more respectful. "You don't need to know that." Then, Wu Ming snapped his fingers. A golden chain extended from Wu Ming's sleeve and bound Gaoji. It was the celestial lock. The celestial lock was infinitely long. It could still be used after binding Gaoji. Although Galji did not recognize the chain's true identity, he knew it was a divine spark weapon. Lord Villo. Galji did not resist, but he was a little puzzled by Wu Ming's actions. He was trapped in Wu Ming's game of gifts and could not break free. There was no need to use a divine spark weapon to tie him up. I'm going to hand you over to White Yiksha, so I need to do this. As Wu Ming spoke, he reached out and pierced Galji's body. He did not want to kill Galji. When Wu Ming stabbed Galji, a ripple appeared in front of him. Wu Ming only reached his hand in. Wu Ming found what he wanted without much searching. Then, Wu Ming fished out a slightly curled piece of parchment appeared in Wu Ming's hand. It was the contract scroll that Wu Ming used to force Galji into a gift match. Game name of gift, accumulated time contestants, Galji, Aurora, ringtone, Glaya Grove contestant victory condition 1, stay in the designated venue, unlimited, contestant victory condition 2, defeat the organizer contestant defeat condition, leave the designated venue contestant defeat punishment, repeat the game organizer victory condition, defeat the contestant organizer defeat condition, the contestant wins oath, respect the above content, based on the glory, flag, and organizers. Authority, host the gift game. Originate God, seal. That's right, it was such an unsolvable contract document. Not to mention the victory condition, the failure condition was obviously problematic. This obviously did not allow Galji to leave here, even if he had a way to leave, because the failure penalty was to repeat the game. In other words, if Galji and the others used their own way to leave the designated venue, which was Wu Ming's inherent enchantment, then they would fail, and the failure penalty would make them return here again. The only way was to defeat the organizer. However, after Wu Ming locked them here, he did not care about them anymore. Wu Ming only met Galji twice, and Wu Ming did not even see the others, let alone defeat them. And this was not against the rules. After all, there was no rule that the organizer could not leave the designated venue, so this unsolvable gift game essentially became a gift game that restricted the movements of Galji and the others. And now, Wu Ming wanted to destroy this gift game. Kaka. Wu Ming condensed a power that Galji did not recognize in his hand, and the soft parchment made the sound of a hard object shattering. Wu Ming was using the source power to destroy the gift game. As long as the gift game was destroyed, Galji and the others could be freed from the shackles of the gift game. As for why he did not pause it, after all, deleting and pausing were two different things. After Wu Ming handed Galji over to White Yiksha, he did not want to care about them anymore, so Wu Ming chose to destroy this gift game directly. Crack! With Wu Ming's continuous force, the entire parchment shattered. Chapter 885. Snap! Wu Ming snapped his fingers and two figures instantly appeared beside Galji. It was Aurora and Belle. Your Highness. Although Ling was unconscious when he caught her, it had been a long time since then and she had already woken up. You paused our game of grace. Aurora stood vaguely in front of Galji and looked at Wu Ming with vigilance. Sir Villo didn't pause the game. He directly destroyed the forced game of grace, Galji answered on behalf of Wu Ming. Although Aurora and Belle were shocked that Wu Ming could destroy the game of grace, they were more shocked by Galji's attitude toward Wu Ming. Your Highness. Aurora and Belle were puzzled by Galji's attitude. Why was he so respectful? Belle, Aurora, you must correct your attitude as a prisoner. Galji looked at the two of them and gestured for them to not act rashly. I made a deal with your Highness. I will help him deal with the enemy, and he will willingly be handed over to White Yiksha to be imprisoned. Waving the heaven lock in his hand, Wu Ming explained to the two of them. Although Aurora and Belle were a little surprised, it was not impossible to accept after thinking about it carefully. After all, if it was a deal of this level, His Highness would still be able to accept it. However, Wu Ming and Galji's deal wasn't like this. However, Wu Ming wouldn't let Galji off and Galji was aware of this, so he didn't expose Wu Ming's words. Besides, Galji didn't know if it was due to Wu Ming's influence, but he thought through a lot while meditating on the 7th floor. How could dragging out an ignoble existence compare to living honorably? Galji indeed had to pay the price for his previous actions. If not, wouldn't those who died indirectly because of him be wronged? He was a hero who appeared in the post-apocalyptic world, so he had to do something worthy of the name Galji. And most importantly, Wyrm would help him deal with the enemy. Therefore, even though he was about to be imprisoned, Galji felt that he had gained freedom. Freedom from being dominated by others. Sir Villo is right. We're about to go to jail. I'm sorry for dragging you into this. Galji looked at the two of them apologetically. What are you talking about, Your Highness? Since you want to go to jail, we will definitely accompany you. Grabbing the trapped Galji, Ring shook her head. Aurora had the same idea. There was no need for apologies between them. The reason they had gathered together was because of Galji. Since Galji was going to jail, they would accompany him. Wyrm was very clear about this, so he only bound Galji. After all, as long as Galji was still there, the others wouldn't leave him. It was precisely because he knew this that Galji said, "Sorry for implicating you," instead of, "You can leave." Of course, even if they wanted to leave, Wyrm might not allow it. No, Wyrm definitely wouldn't allow them to leave. Although Galji was the mastermind, Aurora and Ring's sins weren't small either, so they had to be punished. So, where's Glea? Aurora looked at Wyrm again. She and Ring had been summoned to Galji's side by Wyrm using teleportation, but why wasn't Glea there? One had to know that Glea was seriously injured in order to block Wyrm's weapon salvo. Could it be? Aurora and Ring suddenly felt sad. Both of them were guessing if Glea had died from his serious injuries. However, only Galji looked indifferent because he knew very well that Glea must be fine. Wyrm wouldn't attack Glea, and without external influence, a griffin's vitality was very tenacious. It wouldn't die so easily. Don't worry. It's just because a companion in my community is looking for Glea for something. It's just that the discussion hasn't ended yet. Just wait a little. This made Aurora and Ring feel helpless. In this day and age, they still had to wait when they were sent to prison, but at this moment, the celestial lock binding Galji made a clanging sound. According to Wyrm's request, as long as Haruhibu Yao and Glea finished their discussion, they could knock on the heaven lock that bound Glea and send a message to Wyrm, asking him to pick her up. Although the interval was very short, there was no doubt that Haruhibu Yao had finished talking to Glea. My companion has finished talking to Glea. Wyrm snapped his fingers again. In an instant, the surrounding scene suddenly changed, and everyone came to a forest. Your Highness. Glea's surprised voice entered everyone's ears. Glea and Galji were also bound by golden chains, and there was a girl beside them. The girl was Haruhibu Yao. Elder Glea, are your injuries okay? Ring immediately ran to Glea's side, looking rather worried. Then, Aurora and Galji followed. After all, Glea was indeed seriously injured at that time. Except for the wings that have not recovered yet, the injuries on my body have mostly recovered. Glea was right. At that time, he had his back facing Wyrm's attack. Therefore, as a griffin, his wings had suffered the most serious injuries. It's good that you're fine. At this moment, Galji was also relieved. While Galji and the others were talking, Wyrm also talked to Haruhibu Yao at this moment. How is it? Did you get anything you want to know? Haruhibu Yao thought for a moment and nodded, but then shook his head. This made Wyrm a little dumbfounded. Are you not satisfied with the answer? Wyrm guessed. Yes. This time, Haruhibu Yao nodded honestly. However, I'm already very satisfied to be able to talk to Glea. Haruhibu Yao showed a satisfied smile. It seemed that he had made friends with Glea. Wyrm, on the other hand, felt that Haruhi Hiroyuki was quite content. After all, not everyone has the opportunity to find clues when looking for something they want. Although Wyrm didn't know what Haruhibu Yao was looking for, Haruhibu Yao should be satisfied to be able to find a clue. Do you need my help? Whatever Haruhibu Yao was looking for, Wyrm would find it in an instant when he returned to the route. However, Haruhibu Yao refused. I can do it myself. Then, Haruhibu Yao's face showed a trace of unwillingness to admit defeat. As expected of a problem child. At this moment, Wuming could only smile helplessly. But it was also true that if it was something important to Haruhibu Yao, then it was better to let Haruhibu Yao do it alone. Then, Wuming looked at Galji and the others who were still chatting. It's almost time to go. It was time to go to jail. Chapter 886. North District, 54545 Outer Sect Ruins. At this moment, the magma lake had been artificially cooled. White Yiksha methodically issued one order after another, allowing the Alliance's community to begin the restoration of 54,545 Outer Sect. Because the time between Absolute Evil's appearance and its destruction was too short, there were no high-ranking powerhouses near 54545 Outer Sect. Even Vera had been abducted by Wuming, leaving White Yiksha alone. Therefore, the restoration of the North District's 5-digit Outer Sect 54545 Outer Sect fell to her. Seriously, I'm not the ruler of the North District. Why should I be the commander? White Yiksha kept complaining. In fact, the main reason was that no one came to help, which caused White Yiksha's dissatisfaction. After the rulers of the North District received the news that Absolute Evil had been destroyed, they did not even think of going to 54545 Outer Sect. When there was a powerful external enemy like Absolute Evil, perhaps they would unite, but once Absolute Evil was eliminated, they would fall back into a state of internal strife. Anyway, it was not their outer sect, so there was no need to care. Moreover, White Yiksha could not care about them if they did not come. After all, Absolute Evil had been destroyed, so it did not matter if they came or not. But she was definitely dissatisfied. Villo, that brat, really abducted Vera. Although Vera did not play much of a role in command, she was at least someone from the North District. Now that the North District's outer sect was being rebuilt, how could a ruler of the East District be in command? However, at this moment, White Yiksha happened to sense Wuming's presence. Why is that brat Villo here? Although White Yiksha complained and hoped that someone could replace her to command the reconstruction of 54,545 Outer Sect, she really did not expect Wuming to come back. Are you looking for me to talk about the Dragon of Origin? Or is there something else? White Yiksha guessed in her heart. Yo White Yiksha. Wuming greeted White Yiksha as he walked into the small command post that was temporarily set up. Where's Vera? Where have you abducted Vera? White Yiksha asked in annoyance. I sent Vera back to her community. Anyway, Vera can't do anything here, can she? As if it was his own home, Wuming sat down without hesitation, but because there were no chairs, Wuming could only find something to sit on. Then why did thou come back? What's the matter? White Yiksha didn't mind Wuming's behavior. He was used to it. I'm here to hand Galji and the others over to you. As Wuming spoke, he extended his hand and a translucent ball of light appeared in his hand. Galji, Belle, Aurora, and Gria could be vaguely seen in the ball of light. This is just a simple sealing boundary formed by Lune runes. You should be able to open it easily. As for why he treated Galji like this, the three of them and a griffin were indeed not small. It was really not good to hand them over to White Yiksha. This way, they were sealed in a ball of light and handed to White Yiksha. It was also convenient for White Yiksha to carry them around. Thou is thoughtful. White Yiksha took the ball of light that sealed Galji and the others. He took out the gift card and the ball of light disappeared with a wave of his hand. After I'm done with this, I'll lock them up in the East Prison. It was reasonable to say that Wuming's mission was completed, but Wuming showed no signs of leaving. Is there anything else? I have to leave Hakata for a while. As if he was waiting for White Yiksha to say this, Wuming immediately answered after White Yiksha asked. It's not like thou has never left before, White Yiksha complained. Or are thou preparing not to come back for a long time this time? White Yiksha hit the nail on the head. After all, my purpose in coming to Hakata was to find my body. Since my body has been found, I should go and deal with my enemy. This enemy, Wuming referred to Gidia. Even without the Black Origin mud, Gidia was already considered a tyrant in the Type Moon world. With the Black Origin mud, it could be said that Gidia had become even more terrifying. Wuming was not afraid of an enemy like Az Dakaha who only used the Black Origin mud as a weapon, but it was impossible for someone like Gidia to only use the Black Origin mud as a weapon. Simply put, it was the difference between a magician and a magician. Magicians only used magic as a weapon, but magicians would delve deeper into it. If Gaia were to delve deeper into the Black Origin mud and discover something that would allow her to completely master it, it would be very troublesome. Wuming had to take the initiative to attack Gidia before Gidia made a move. In that case, the reason thou came to find me is very clear. Without a doubt, Wuming wanted to ask White Yiksha about the Dragon of Origin before leaving. White Yiksha's expression became serious. With a light wave of her hand, the place where the two were changed. White Yiksha brought Wuming to a special space. In the distance was a large white snow mountain. Wuming and White Yiksha stood on a plain that resembled ice. A trace of light shuttled through the mountain range in the distance. In the distant horizon, one of the venues of White Yiksha's gift game. I don't know much about the Dragon of Origin. I can only provide you with some information. Putting away her usual playful expression, White Yiksha straightened her attitude and looked at Wuming. That's right. White Yiksha brought Wuming here to tell Wuming about the Dragon of Origin. That was a long time ago. It was so long ago that it was longer than my lifespan. As for why White Yiksha said that, it was because, when I first gained sentience, I accidentally saw the Origin Dragon. As if recalling the past, White Yiksha's aura became slightly in line with her age. That was at the end of the day. I didn't know how I discovered the other party. At the same time, the thought of, this is the Dragon of Origin automatically appeared in my mind. Although the other party noticed me, it only glanced at me lightly. There was no emotion in its eyes. After that, it immediately left as though it was just passing by. Turning her head to look at Wuming, White Yiksha continued speaking. I didn't feel that feeling from thee, but judging from the appearance, thy body is exactly the same as the Dragon of Origin's body that I saw. It's just that the size is different, and there's another very important point. White Yiksha flew into the air and looked at Wuming. The Dragon of Origin I saw was much stronger than thee. Even at that time, I felt that I wasn't its match. One had to know that the original White Yiksha was not White Yiksha, but the White Knight Monarch. It was a powerful existence whose spirit lattice had not been shrunk. The Dragon of Origin that White Yiksha mentioned made the White Knight Monarch feel that he was not its match. Without a doubt, the other party must be an existence that exceeds a single digit. White Yiksha judged. By the way, White Yiksha, are there no single-digit existences in Hakata? Chapter 887. Wuming had been in Hakata for a while and had seen existences with 3 to 7 digits. Although White Yiksha had fallen from 2 digits to 4 digits because he had converted to Buddhism, Wuming had a rough understanding of the strength of 2 digits after fighting with Az Dakaha. After all, Az Dakaha, who had the black soil root, could no longer be in 3 digits. He had almost displayed the strength of 2 digits, but Az Dakaha's essence was still in 3 digits. However, Wuming had never heard of or seen the existence of a single digit. In the ancient books in No Name's underground library, Wuming had not found any content related to a single digit. Therefore, Wuming could not help but be curious about a single digit. Actually, from 3 digits onward, you can't divide them according to strength. You have to look at your own spirit lattice. Logically speaking, below 3 digits, you had to look at your spirit lattice to divide them. However, spirit lattice below 3 digits did not have an overwhelming effect on strength. Therefore, from 3 digits onward, you had to divide them according to strength. If your spirit lattice reached 2 digits, your strength would naturally be in 2 digits. Of course, there were those without spirit lattice. At that time, you could only look at your own strength. For example, 16 Knight's essence was human. In addition, there were no traces of spirit lattice on 16 Knights' body. Logically speaking, 16 Knights should be in the 7 digits. However, 16 Knights had an inhumanly strong physique. This allowed 16 Knights' strength to be in the 4 digits. Therefore, 16 Knights' strength was in the 4 digits. However, for an ordinary human to have the strength of 4 digits, 16 Knights' body probably had some hidden power that he had not figured out. In any case, that was what Wuming believed. After that, let's take a look at Az Dakaha. If 1,000,000 gods surrounded Az Dakaha and Az Dakaha activated Avesta to copy the strength of the 1,000,000 gods into himself, Az Dakaha's strength would instantly reach 2 digits. However, under normal circumstances, Az Dakaha's spirit lattice would still be in the 3 digits. Therefore, Az Dakaha's strength in Hakata was a 3-digit demon king who would not cower in the face of a 2-digit enemy. In short, not having a spirit lattice did not mean that one was weak. However, the stronger the spirit lattice, the stronger one was. As for the single digit you mentioned, there is none. With this foreshadowing, White Yiksha's answer to Wuming was much easier. None? Wuming was stunned. I can't say that there aren't any. 1-digit numbers do exist, but they're no longer creatures with self-awareness. They're things like laws. Since 1-digit numbers were something similar to laws, in that case, Hakata's strongest combat power is only in the 2 digits, right? Wuming deduced. You are not stupid. However, Hakata's 2-digit numbers are very rare. There are only 17 in total. As for the 2-digit level, do you know Shakyamuni? That bald donkey belongs to the 2-digit category. This made Wuming come to a realization. It turned out that there were only 17 2-digit numbers in Box Ting. It was indeed as rare as phoenix feathers and Qilin horns. However, if the founder of the world's 3 major religions like Shakyamuni had a 2-digit number, then the main gods of other myths and religions' founders would probably have a 3-digit number. After all, there were only 17 2-digit numbers. However, Hakata had 100 god groups. There were very few god groups that could have a 2-digit number. However, 3-digit god groups were almighty. Therefore, most of the main gods of the god groups should have a 3-digit number. Only a very small number of the main gods of the god groups should have a 4-digit number. Ordinary gods would have a 5-digit number. Therefore, Hakata had said that Absolute Evil's clone body had the strength of a god. After all, most of Absolute Evil's clone bodies had a 5-digit number. A 6-digit number was in existence with some ability. A 7-digit number was probably an ordinary person. That's why I've never heard of the existence of a single-digit number after being in Hakata for so long. This suspicious point had been resolved. No, if it were now, there would still be a single-digit number, White Yiksha said as he stared at Wuming. Are you referring to me? Wuming pointed at himself. I'm referring to you. White Yiksha smiled knowingly at Wuming. Didn't you reveal your true body when you destroyed Az Dakaha? Although I don't know how you hid your spirit lattice, your body leaked a trace of the aura of a spirit lattice. Based on that aura, I can determine that even if I return the Godhead and retrieve the spirit lattice, I won't be your match. Furthermore, it will be an overwhelming victory. Without a doubt, you aren't on the same level as us. You are undoubtedly a single-digit number. The so-called spirit lattice referred to heritage and merit. Hyunryong's heritage was Hyunryong's, and the Villow's merit was the Villow's. Sadrake was considered a figurehead. As the root dragon, Wuming didn't have any heritage or merit. Logically speaking, he didn't have a spirit lattice. Therefore, it wasn't that Wuming had hidden his spirit lattice, but that he really didn't have one. However, White Yiksha said that she had sensed it. As the root dragon, Wuming wasn't bound by the box court. Wuming guessed that his own status had replaced the spirit lattice, causing White Yiksha to make the wrong judgment. However, if one really only looked at Wuming's status, Wuming was indeed higher than any existence in the box court. At this moment, Wuming was an existence that was only one step away from entering the adult stage. Although he had not taken this crucial step, Wu Ming would definitely not be in the double digits now. After all, his hypostasis had been liberated to the maximum. In that case, he would definitely be in the single digits. However, you are much weaker than the root dragon I first encountered. Even so, I can determine that you aren't a two-digit number, but an existence higher than that. As a former two-digit number, White Yiksha's judgment was definitely correct. Although it was unbelievable, it was completely confirmed that Wu Ming was a one-digit number. After that, did you not see the root dragon again? Wu Ming asked again. The next time I saw you was you. Speaking of which, when I saw your true body previously, I couldn't recall it because it was too long ago. However, I kept feeling that it was déjà vu. Fortunately, I'm not that old. I still remember. White Yiksha opened her fan and waved it twice proudly. Then let's end it here. Since White Yiksha had nothing else to say, it was time to end it. No name, I will use my methods to take care of them in secret, but I still have to ask you to take care of them. Wu Ming's secret care was not as effective as White Yiksha's, the local snake's, care on the surface. You don't have to worry about this. Just based on the fact that you defeated absolute evil and No Name's performance during this period of time, No Name can be raised by a single digit to 6 digits. Furthermore, I'm prepared to give No Name the authority of a region ruler. The community's hierarchy was related to the entire community. It wasn't something that could be promoted just because one person made a significant contribution. However, 16 knights and the others had indeed contributed a lot to No Name during this period of time after coming to the box court. Just the matter of defeating absolute evil's avatar was enough. Their strength had also been recognized by the lower 6 or 7 digits. With Wu Ming's defeat of absolute evil as an opportunity, No Name would have no problem rising to 6 digits. As for the region ruler, there was no need to mention it. No Name was originally a region ruler, and now it had the strength. White Yiksha was just returning it to its rightful owner. Then I'll leave it to you. Chapter 888. After bidding farewell to White Yiksha, Wu Ming returned to No Name in the East District. After all, even if he wanted to leave, he had to at least let his companions know. What was rare was that Wu Ming did not directly use the teleportation gate to enter No Name. Instead, he used the teleportation gate to arrive at a place that was still some distance away from No Name. Wu Ming was prepared to walk into No Name on foot, treating it as an experience. After all, I don't know when I'll be back again. Wu Ming finished speaking and walked towards No Name. The first thing that entered Wu Ming's eyes were naturally the 2 stone giants guarding the door. Then, Pest appeared in front of Wu Ming's eyes. Pest. Pest stood at the door, as if he had guessed that Wu Ming would go through the main entrance and quietly waited for him. Master, Senior Letitia asked me to wait for you here. Pest called out with some reluctance and even bowed. However, due to Wu Ming's abuse of power, Pest did not dare to be rude. He had always listened to Wu Ming and the others in No Name. As expected, he guessed it in the end. Wu Ming revealed a half-helpless and half-happy smile. He was helpless that his actions had been guessed. It was really contradictory that his companions could guess his actions. Let's go, Pest. Wu Ming did not say anything else. Since that was the case, the others in No Name probably knew that Wu Ming was preparing to leave. After all, Wu Ming had come to the box court to find his body. Since he had already found it, there was no need for Wu Ming to continue staying. Master, are you leaving? Although Wu Ming knew that Pest definitely knew about this, Pest's bluntness still surprised Wu Ming. That's right. Speaking of which, who guessed that I was leaving first? Wu Ming also asked without mincing his words. 16 knights in reverse. Pest had no intention of hiding anything and went straight to the point. It had to be said that the two of them were indeed a master-servant duo. They were really straightforward. Upon hearing Pest's reply, Wu Ming thought to himself, as expected. In the current No Name, other than Wu Ming, only 16 knights had such a brain. However, Wu Ming knew that he was going to leave soon, so he didn't care about this. Forget it, I'll do as you wish today. After that, Pest didn't say anything. He just obediently led the way for Wuming. Speaking of which, did they hold a banquet? It doesn't look like he's in the house, and he even asked you to lead the way. It was obvious that Pest wasn't leading Wuming in the direction of the house. Instead, the two of them were circling around No Name's house. It looked like they were heading towards the back of the house. Yes, Senior Letitia and the others have prepared a banquet for Master. Firstly, it's to celebrate Master defeating absolute evil. Secondly, it's to bid Master farewell. Wuming nodded silently. If that was the case, the entire No Name would be present. It was no wonder that it wasn't in the house. After all, even if No Name didn't have many members, there were still more than 100 of them. Most importantly, most of them were children. Compared to holding a banquet in the house, it was more comfortable to hold it in the open air. It could be said that they were considerate of the children. Wuming turned his gaze and saw Pest's frail, childlike figure. Although Pest was the Demon King, he was only pushed to the front by the 80 million wraiths who died from the Black Death as their representative and sat on the Demon King's throne. To be honest, Pest was just a child. Pest, have you mastered 4-digit strength recently? Wuming's tone was like an elder caring for a junior. Hearing Wuming's words, Pest froze for a moment and his footsteps slowed. But shortly after, Pest regained his composure and continued walking forward. Are you wondering why I care about you? Wuming, who saw through Pest's thoughts, asked again. Yes. Pest, who was walking in front of Wuming, nodded and replied softly. Thinking about it, it's not strange at all. You're my servant, so of course I care about you. Little did he know that Wuming's words could easily cause misunderstandings. Although Pest wouldn't misunderstand, these words were still jarring to Pest's ears. Pest stopped in his tracks and spoke with a heavy tone. But I'm only a slave of the master of No Name. Pest didn't care about Wuming's identity and began to throw caution to the wind. After all, she was the Demon King who was defeated by Wuming. She was a defeated Demon King who belonged to No Name. To be honest, although there was a saying that a defeated Demon King would be included in the community of the person who defeated them, this rule wasn't mandatory. If the community didn't need it, they could reject it. From Pest's point of view, the reason she was included in No Name was because No Name currently lacked combat power. If that wasn't the case, what awaited Pest would be death. Now that the community lacked manpower, Pest was included, so she was no different from a slave of No Name. Previously, when Wuming was talking about his experiences in the Northern District in the chat room, although Pest was present, she didn't speak. She only listened quietly as if she didn't have the right to speak. In the end, it was because of this reason. However, this was Pest's personal opinion. In fact, no one in No Name thought of Pest as a slave. Not even the slightest bit. Since she was part of the community, everyone was a family. Back then, Letitia joined No Name because she was defeated by the main force of the previous generation of No Name. Now, Letitia was completely integrated into No Name. She didn't look like a slave at all. Instead, Black Rabbit treated her intimately and even called Letitia Senior. First of all, we don't mean to treat you as a slave. That's just what you think. Wuming used his status as Pest's master to walk to Pest's side and rub Pest's little head with his large hand, as if telling Pest not to think too much. No one in No Name has ever ordered you around, right? And I didn't give you any unreasonable orders. Moreover, Wuming didn't give Pest many orders. Ever since he summoned Pest, Wuming had been running around outside and didn't see Pest much. You have to work hard to communicate with the others in the community, Pest. However, Pest didn't seem to care. I don't think I can communicate with the people of the community who killed my companions and enslaved me. That was true, but Pest was still a child. In this regard, Wuming could only sigh silently. Then, Wuming quietly reached his hand into the golden ripples that had opened up at some point and searched for something. Then, Wuming placed the item in front of Pest. Here. Chapter 889. What appeared in front of Pester was a bunch of cotton candy. Pester was stunned when she saw the cotton candy. This reminded her of the first time she met Wyrm. At that time, Wyrm had also bought cotton candy for her. She had to admit that the cotton candy was quite sweet. Let's not talk about how you are with the others for now. We have to get closer to each other. This cotton candy was bought by Wyrm the last time. It was kept fresh by magic, so it had been left in Wyrm's space. However, Pester didn't take it and turned her head to the side. Also, about your companions, if you use the method I used to summon you, they will definitely respond. However, when Wyrm finished speaking, Pester was clearly stunned. You need a holy relic, right? I don't have their holy relic, Pester said in a fit of pique. La Ting's case wasn't too bad. The flute she used was left behind, but it had been confiscated by White Yiksha. It was difficult to find it back. As for Wei Shi, he really didn't leave anything behind after disappearing. You should have seen how powerful your master is, right? Even without the holy relic, I can still find them. This is the agreement between you and your master. Trust me. To put it simply, Wyrm was prepared to use the Great Origin to continue cheating. As someone who had seen Wyrm's main body the moment they formed the contract, Pester naturally understood that Wyrm was special. Since it was a promise made by such a person, it definitely wouldn't be a lie. However, Pester still seemed to be a little hesitant. She moved her small hand and wanted to grab the cotton candy in front of her, but she couldn't make up her mind. Take it. Wyrm grabbed Pester's hand and placed the cotton candy stick in her hand. If you need anything in the future, just tell your master. I'm your master. Although Pest was summoned as an Avenger, it didn't mean that he had revenge in his heart. It was just that the Avenger job was most suitable for him. After Wyrm finished speaking, he didn't care about Pest's reaction. He held Pest's hand, which was still holding the cotton candy, and headed towards their destination. At this moment, Pest felt his heart warming up a little. Pester raised his head slightly and looked at Wyrm. He started to think that his master wasn't that bad after all. One more thing. You have to build a good relationship with the other members of the community. Don't keep a straight face all the time, got it? Wyrm was like a long-winded father, constantly reminding Pest. But Pest couldn't refute that. I got it. The favorability points that he had just added dropped instantly. Before this, Pest was ready to go all out. Even if Pester angered Wyrm with her words and Wyrm wanted to kill her, it didn't matter. But now, her words were restricted. In addition, Wyrm was Pest's master. In short, Pest couldn't raise his head in front of Wyrm now. However, when Wyrm saw Pest's helpless expression, Wyrm also felt helpless. Forget it. Let's take it slow. After all, Rome wasn't built in a day. He didn't want to force Pest. As long as there was change, it didn't matter if it took a long time. However, just as Wyrm and Pest were chatting, the two had already arrived at their destination. As everyone knew, as the largest community in the Lower East District, No Name's land was very vast. Behind No Name's castle-shaped building, there was a large open space. No one knew what it was for, but it was very spacious. At this moment, dozens of tables were placed on the originally spacious ground. The tables were covered with a not-so-fancy tablecloth. Plates of different shapes and sizes were placed on the tablecloth, and on the plates were various delicacies from the box court world. Did you rob someone? Wyrm couldn't help but shout when he saw this scene. After all, there were so many sumptuous delicacies. Whether it was the appearance, color, or even the aroma that Wyrm smelled, it all represented the value of these delicacies. How could it be a robbery, Mr. Villo? Everyone bought these from a high-class restaurant together. Black Rabbit's very recognizable voice came from behind Wyrm. Wyrm turned his head. More than 100 people stood not far behind Wyrm. Without a doubt, after seeing Wyrm arrive, they secretly came out from the nearby building. Although Wyrm used his psychic ability to detect them, he had to pretend that he didn't know. Among the community members, most of the children were lined up like bushes. Compared to these children, Black Rabbit, 16 Knights, and the others clearly had the advantage of height. Even Letitia in her lowly form was half a head taller than these children. Perhaps, only Ren and Pest were as tall as these children of the community. Oh, Pest is actually holding hands with the Villo. Jiuyu and Asuka looked at Pest, who was holding hands with Wuming, as if he didn't care about the situation. There's a situation. Haruai Hiroyuki, who was holding the three-furred cat, said simply, but the gossipy look in his eyes proved that this guy and Jiuyu and Asuka were both problematic children. Hearing this, Pest also reacted. He immediately shook off Wuming's hand and shrunk to the side. I think the two of you have nothing better to do. Wuming looked at Jiuyu and Asuka and Haruai Hiroyuki as if he had already given up. The heavens took pity on him. He really didn't have any messy thoughts about Pest, but being ridiculed by others really made Wuming a little unhappy. Wuming stopped looking at Jiuyu and Asuka and Haruai Hiroyuki and looked at Ren and Black Rabbit. Since I'm already here, don't let the children stand there like idiots. Hurry up and eat. After all, they were supposed to celebrate and send off Wuming, so they had to let Wuming speak first. Otherwise, they would have already started eating. They didn't need to wait for Wuming. Wuming's sharp eyes noticed that many children were salivating. They hadn't eaten such good food in the past 3 years. It was the same even 3 years ago. After all, 3 years ago, most of their teeth weren't fully grown yet. Naturally, they couldn't eat such delicious food. More importantly, 3 years ago, some of the children didn't even know how to walk yet. In short, they were basking in Wuming's glory today. Alright, everyone. Since Mr. Villo is here, let's start the banquet. Oh oh oh. The cheers of the children seemed to break through the sky. This made Wuming feel a little deafened. Sure enough, the children were hot-blooded and their voices were loud. Under Black Rabbit's encouragement and lead, the children, including Ren, happily ran to the front of the tables and began the long-awaited journey of delicious food. Chapter 890. Even Pest was squeezed to the edge of the table by the crowd of over 100 children. However, Pest, who had never faced such a situation before, was instantly at a loss. He glanced at Wuming from time to time, trying to seek help from Wuming. However, only Wuming's lips responded to Pest, eat as much as you can. If it was said that some of the children in No Name had enjoyed such delicacies before, then Pest was the only one who had never seen such a sumptuous meal in front of him. After all, Pest couldn't even fill his stomach when he came to the box court. After coming to the box court, Pest, who was bent on revenge, had never enjoyed such delicacies before. The considerate Wuming naturally wouldn't stop Pest from enjoying the delicacies. Pest looked at Wuming resentfully and was still hesitating. But soon, Pest was surrounded by Lily and a few other warm-hearted children. He half-willingly and half-forced to enjoy the delicacies with them. As expected, they are a bunch of children. Wuming looked at this heartwarming scene and was in a rather good mood. Although it's a banquet held with the excuse of celebrating you, that's just a passing remark. It's actually just to let the children of the community enjoy a rare celebration. 16 Knights walked to Wuming's side and crossed his arms behind his head. He looked at the children of the community eating heartily with a smile on his face. I don't know when our Lord 16 Knights has become so arrogant. Wuming crossed his arms and looked at 16 Knights with the same gaze that Jiu Asudara and Kasuga Yayoi used to look at Wuming and Pest, mocking him. Oh, you want to play games with me? I'm very confident. 16 Knights' eyes flashed as he looked directly at Wuming. I don't want to play games with you. Wuming spread his arms and looked like he was surrendering. What a joke. Who could beat a problem child when it came to talking? Wuming would not ask for a snub. By the way, when did you start preparing? Wuming was naturally referring to the banquet in front of him. The dozens of tables of delicacies in front of him must have taken a lot of effort. Even if he counted from the time Wuming left to find White Yiksha, time was rather tight. Letitia, who did not participate in the banquet and was standing behind Wuming, suddenly spoke up. Master, actually, everyone has been planning this banquet to celebrate the community's continuous progress. It's just that you didn't know about it. Because they had already started preparing, the members of No Name were able to prepare these delicacies in such a short period of time. At the same time, it was precisely because 16th Night had already started preparing for it that celebrating and sending off Wuming was really just a matter of convenience. In other words, 16th Night wasn't lying. Ahem. Indeed, we should hold a banquet like this. Wuming ignored 16th Night's teasing gaze as he coughed. Since the community had begun to develop steadily, they could not always lead a hard life. How could it be that they were eating chaff when they had a house full of gold? Of course, no matter what, it had to be done in moderation. By the way, since it's a banquet, Letitia, there's no need for you to be my maid anymore. Join the banquet with Black Rabbit and the others. Look, aren't they greeting you? Wuming was not wrong. Black Rabbit, Lily, Ren, and many other children of the community, as well as Jo Yuasuka and Kasuga Hikari, who had already joined the banquet, were all greeting them from time to time. I'm afraid they're calling for you, Master. Letitia playfully retorted. Letitia's words were not without reason. They might actually be calling for Wuming and the other two who had not yet joined the banquet. At that moment, Wuming could only smile and shake his head helplessly. Let's go. Although you're just a matter of convenience, we're still here to celebrate and send you off. After 16th Night finished speaking, she ignored Wuming and went straight to the banquet. I really don't know what to do with you guys. After all, Wuming had already said that he would follow the wishes of everyone in the community. If that was the case, then it was better to comply. Not sure if it was the universe or some other special space that stretched as far as the eye could see, there were large transparent yet opaque balls arranged in a regular pattern. A meteor was moving forward at a speed that normal people would not be able to see. It seemed as if there was no end to it. This was the gap between the worlds, a special space that had no end. Between the worlds. And that meteor was Wuming, who had left the box garden world. After happily attending the banquet, Wuming interacted with his No Name companions for a while, gave Letitia and Pest some instructions, and chatted with 16 Nights Reversal for a while. After that, Wuming left in an extremely natural manner, as though he was going out. There were no excessive goodbyes, no complicated words. It was really as if he was going out for a normal trip. At most, it could be considered as a long trip. Wuming left just like that. The main force of No Name understood that Wuming's long trip this time was not simple. However, no one directly said it out loud. Instead, they treated it as normal. They did not think that Wuming would really not return. They all believed in Wuming and believed that he would definitely return soon. Just like what Wuming had said to White Yiksha and Vera previously, it was fine as long as they trusted Wuming. There was no need to care about anything else. And 16th Night, Black Rabbit, and the others did the same. As for why, perhaps, this was what they meant by companions. Wuming collected his scattered thoughts, shook his head, and suppressed these thoughts. He then increased his flying speed. Because Wuming's body had spent a long time in the box garden world, his entire dragon body had been greatly strengthened. Therefore, even if he did not deliberately activate his Phoenix transformation and only revealed his original body, it was already easy for him to reach this speed. At this moment, Wuming was preparing to use his body to fly through the gap between the worlds to return to the route. Because Wuming's backup machine was guarding the route, the entire route was hidden. Even the entrance was not the one that Wuming had seen before. Apart from using a special method to enter, or Wuming removing the route's concealment, there was no other way to enter the route. However, Wuming's backup machine inside the route was like a lighthouse that guided Wuming through the fog at night. Wuming only needed to rely on his senses to constantly move forward, and he would be able to reach the route. For example, Wuming did not know what was going on. All he saw was the scenery around him blurring, and Wuming had returned to the route. Chapter 891. It felt as though he had fallen into an environment, but Wuming knew that it was just a special way for Wuming to enter the route through his backup machine. The route was still the same universe, and there were not many changes. On the platform at the center of the route, a white dragon that was smaller than Wu Ming's curled up body and spread its wings. It lay there quietly as though it was asleep, but at the same time, it looked like it had lost its life. In short, it was quite contradictory. That was Wu Ming's backup machine. It wasn't wrong to say that it was alive, but it wasn't wrong to say that it wasn't alive either. If you really had to name it, it was a mechanical life form mixed with magic. Like a swallow returning to its nest, Wu Ming flew to the platform naturally. The small platform automatically expanded a little after Wu Ming flew over, just enough to accommodate Wu Ming and his backup machine. Even so, the space around them did not change at all, as though it was infinite space. That was not wrong. After all, this was the route, and there was no concept of size in the space inside. Not to mention space, there was not even the concept of time. It was just like the route of the M-shaped moon, where everything was chaotic. The route was essentially the same. Apart from Wu Ming and the route Black Mud, which was born from the route, no one could walk out of the route alive after entering. After landing on the platform, Wu Ming had no intention of putting away his backup machine. He continued to let the backup machine act as the host and take control of the route. After all, Wu Ming would have to leave again soon. Although it doesn't feel real, I've become a lot stronger. Looking at the backup machine next to him, Wu Ming could feel that his body had indeed grown a lot in size at such a close distance. Compared to the backup machine in the route, Wu Ming was now many times bigger. Wu Ming even felt like the backup machine beside him was a figurine. Although Wu Ming's body could freely expand or shrink, the size of his body in the realm of worlds was something that Wu Ming subconsciously controlled. In other words, Wu Ming's current size was what Wu Ming subconsciously thought was appropriate. This meant that Wu Ming's strength had also increased by leaps and bounds. After confirming the increase in his strength once again, Wu Ming made up his mind. It was time to find trouble with Gidia. But before that, Wu Ming had to act on the promise he made in the box world. He had to help Pest summon Wesley and Latine, punish the person behind Galji's words, and finally, and most importantly, the problem of absolute evil in the box world. However, Wu Ming didn't intend to let himself handle these matters. Wu Ming was going to let Kalis help Wu Ming with these matters. It wasn't that Wu Ming was lazy. Kalis could totally do it, and the results might be several times better than Wu Ming's. Kalis's brain alone was hundreds of millions of times faster than a human computer. In addition, Kalis was a product of the mysterious realm, so her efficiency was many times higher than Wu Ming's. She could do these things with half the effort. That was why Wu Ming had the idea of letting Kalis do it for him. When Kalis and Wu Ming's bodies were lost in the box world, Wu Ming was troubled by certain things. Now, he had finally found Kalis. If everything was left to Kalis, what would Wu Ming do? Wu Ming was naturally going to make a trip to the seventh singularity. As early as when Wu Ming obtained his dependent avatar, he could already multitask. In other words, even if his consciousness stayed in the root, he could still control the spirit-based avatar to go to the singularity in real time. It was just that Wu Ming didn't like to do it. Wu Ming felt that it was a little perfunctory. If he got used to it, he was afraid that the future Wu Ming would become a central processing machine. Although it would not cause schizophrenia, Wu Ming still liked to put all his consciousness into the spirit-based avatar and use it to encounter anything in the singularity. Such words made Wu Ming feel like he was more like a human than the mysterious and noble origin dragon. Taking a step back, Wu Ming had already left the trivial things to Kalis to prepare. If he stayed in the root, he would have nothing to do. So, he might as well put all his attention into the spirit-based avatar and seriously deal with everything that he encountered. I suffered a big loss at Gorgon's hands. How can I not get back at him? After temporarily taking over control of the standby machine, Wu Ming lay on the platform. Some of the necessary details still had to be handled by Wu Ming himself. After that, he could leave it to Kalis. I wonder how Tachika and the others are doing. According to Wu Ming's speculation, Tachika and the others should have reached the last singularity by now. Just in time. I can solve the problem of absolute evil while I'm at it. He decided to solve the problem of the singularity as soon as possible, and then go on a crusade against Gideon with Tachika and the others. Wuming stretched out his dragon claw and tapped the empty space in front of him. A naked spirit base avatar appeared in front of Wuming, and the face was exactly the face of Wuming's human form. Then, Wuming spoke to Enkidu and Kalas. Enkidu, Kalas, I'm counting on you. Wuming meant for Enkidu and Kalas to accompany Wuming's spirit base to the singularity in the form of avatars. Enkidu didn't say anything. Instead, the golden heaven lock wrapped around Wuming's dragon claw arrived in front of Wuming's spirit base like a swimming dragon, causing a series of clanking sounds. The wedge at the tip of the heaven lock gently tapped Wuming's spirit base. In an instant, a silver-white chain appeared on Wuming's body. Not only that, but the silver-white chain also had a hint of gold, which made it look quite extraordinary. From this, it could be seen that Enkidu had already connected his avatar to Wuming's spirit base. Next was Kalas's turn. Hum. A buzzing sound that sounded like an auditory hallucination appeared inside the great source. However, this wasn't an auditory hallucination, but rather the sound of Kalas's movements. Wuming even felt his head vibrating slightly. Instantly, an invisible and mysterious signal like an electric wave was emitted from the dragon horn headpiece on Wuming's head. In the next second, a headpiece that looked like a dragon horn crown appeared on Wuming's avatar's head, shining with a light that seemed to be full of wisdom. At this moment, Kalas had also completed the connection with Wuming's spirit base. Next, it's absolute evil. Chapter 892. With that, Wuming waved his hand, and Az Dakaha's three-headed dragon body appeared in the center of Wuming's dragon claw. Wuming tapped Az Dakaha's body lightly, and for some unknown reason, Az Dakaha's body instantly disintegrated into mysterious particles, and all of them were absorbed into the newly created spirit base by Wuming. In that case, Kalas, you must complete the absolute evil problem first. After all, if he did not complete the absolute evil problem first, this spirit base would not be able to be used in the singularity. Yes, Master. The dragon horn on Wuming's head responded. Then, Wuming gave Kalas the authority. After everything was ready, Wuming tapped his spirit base lightly. Go. A summoning magic circle appeared under the spirit base's feet, and in an instant, Wuming's spirit base disappeared. Kalas, Enkidu, I'll leave it to you. Wuming finished and fell into a deep sleep. The moment Wuming fell into a deep sleep, the golden chains wrapped around Wuming's dragon claw rattled, and as if they were endless, they danced around the entire route, as if they were protecting Wuming, who was at the center of the platform. At the same time, the dragon horn on Wuming's head also glowed, as if it was using Wuming's authority to do something. Soon after, the entire route fell into darkness once more. Only the golden chains that covered the route and Wuming's dragon horn headdress shone, both of them fulfilling their duty to the fullest. In the northern fir forest, in an inconspicuous bush, a magic array suddenly appeared and glowed brightly. The light of the magic circle disappeared, and the magic circle lost its form, but a figure appeared in the bush. How did I end up here? Wuming walked out of the bush, took off the grass and other things on his body, and used magic to transform into a set of Uruk clothes. Wuming began to complain. By the way, this should be Gorgon's territory, right? How did I end up here? When Wuming inserted the spirit base into the Mesopotamia singularity, he clearly aimed in the direction of the Uruk, and Wuming thought that no matter what, he could at least get closer to the Uruk. But instead of getting close to the Uruk, he ended up near the enemy's base. Although Gorgon said that she would not come out of her temple before she recovered, if Wuming, who once heavily injured her, appeared in front of Gorgon's gate again, she might not be able to resist the urge to come out and beat him. In any case, I should leave this place first. As for the idea of taking advantage of this opportunity to kill Gorgon, Wuming had considered it before, but the real enemy was probably not Gorgon. Wuming thought of the dream he had the night when he left the Quetzalcoatl's territory. At that time, Wuming only sensed that there was a stronger enemy behind all this, and according to his discussion with Gilgamesh and Merlin, that existence was probably the real Tiamat. He did not know what effect eliminating Gorgon would have on Tiamat. If it could weaken Tiamat, it would be best, but if Gorgon's death caused Tiamat to appear in person, it would be really bad. Kalas hadn't dealt with the absolute evil issue yet, and Wuming's current spiritual base was temporarily no match for Tiamat, so he had to wait for a while. Then, according to his own judgment, Wuming began to move in the direction of the Uruk. In order to avoid encountering magical beasts that might exist in the fir forest, Wuming did not choose to directly pass through the fir forest. Instead, he chose to detour to the highlands in the southwest, preparing to return to the Uruk from there. Even if it was a magical beast, it was impossible to run to such a desolate place. That was why Wuming chose this place. Standing on a bare mountainous platform, Wuming couldn't help but complain. If the magical beasts can detour from the mountainous area, perhaps the Uruk will be doomed. But that was impossible. Gorgon alone couldn't produce a large number of magical beasts with the ability to fly or travel in the highlands. Besides, if it could, perhaps Gorgon would have done so long ago and there would be no need for it to fight to the death with the humans on the magical beasts' front. Could it be that Gorgon was waiting for something? In Wuming's opinion, this was too unrealistic. And as a non-human servant, Wuming naturally heard it clearly. Snore. As the growl got closer, Wuming scanned his surroundings. Wuming was standing on a small platform, but even if it was a platform, it was still a highland. Therefore, if there were creatures walking from a low place to a high place, Wuming wouldn't be able to see those creatures with his eyes because of the wide platform. And if those creatures spread to surround them, not to mention ordinary people, even the slightly weaker servants could only wait for death. That's right, Wuming was surrounded. Wuming's mental power clearly transmitted the images of the creatures that were constantly spreading to Wuming's mind. They were some red-haired magical beasts that were more than 2 meters tall and looked like hyenas. Ulidim, eh? Silent's eyes shone with a bright light. The last time he came to this singularity, Wuming saw a magical beast called Ulidim produced by Gorgon, but they seem to be a lot bigger than the last time I saw them. As mentioned before, these Ulidim were more than 2 meters tall. Roughly speaking, they were more than 2.5 meters tall, close to 3 meters tall. The Ulidim that Wuming saw last time weren't that big, at most, they were more than 2 meters tall. As a result, these Ulidim that appeared in front of Wuming were close to 3 meters tall. I'm afraid that Gorgon is really focused on healing his injuries. Otherwise, how could there be so many Ulidim? At present, only Gorgon didn't go out to heal his injuries and focused on producing enhanced magical beasts could explain why these Ulidim were so big. Are they treating me as prey? Wuming couldn't help but scratch his head. They should be able to realize that Wuming wasn't a human, or they couldn't see the difference in strength between the two sides. It was fine if they couldn't feel the difference in strength, but Wuming was emitting a very dangerous aura at the moment. Magical beasts were also beasts, and their perception of danger wasn't as slow as humans. But even if they felt Wuming's powerful aura, the Ulidim were still quite bold and bravely surrounded Wuming. It seems that there is a leader behind the command. It was precisely because of the existence of a leader that these Ulidim didn't retreat because of Wuming's aura. After all, hyenas relied on numbers to compete with leopards and lions for food. Chapter 893. Unfortunately, at this moment, Wuming was neither an ordinary person nor a weak servant. He was a divine servant with an extremely powerful spirit base index. It could only be said that the leader of Ulidim had found the wrong prey. Wuming would treat them as prey instead. While Wuming was thinking, all the Ulidim climbed up the platform and completely surrounded Wuming. However, these Ulidim did not launch an attack. They just surrounded Wuming as if waiting for something. Then, the earth began to tremble. Boom! 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 A behemoth walked up from the mountainous platform. It was a red-haired, golden-haired kobold with a rag around its waist. Because it walked upright, it was much taller than the other Ulidim, and its body was full of muscles. Compared to Wuming, it was like a small giant. Its head was the same as the head of the Ulydum, but this kobold's eyes were blood red. There were no whites or eyeballs. They were completely blood red, just like a berserker who had gone berserk from all the killing. The key point was that this kobold exuded a much stronger aura than the other Ulydum. It seemed that this kobold was the leader of these Ulydum. Roar! The kobold roared at Wuming as if it was saying something, but ordinary people could not understand the language of the demonic beasts. However, Wuming unexpectedly understood. The kobold's general idea was more or less like this: I am Ulydum, one of the 11 sons of Tiamat. I am also a son of the mother goddess. Why do you betray the mother goddess, Lachum? This made Wuming confused. How did he become Lachum? Although Wuming did not know why the kobold called him Lachum, he understood one thing. The kobold walking upright in front of him was different from other mass-produced demonic beasts. It was probably the real Ulydum of the 11 sons of Tiamat. The original Ulydum alone was far more intimidating than the mass-produced Ulydum. If this Ulydum was converted into a servant, it was probably a god-level servant, and a very strong one. There were also levels in the god level. Take Absolute Evil's avatar for example. Absolute Evil's two-headed dragon avatar was mostly a 5-digit number, which was a god-level disaster. But first of all, anything above 5 digits was a god level. And if the Ulydum in front of Wuming was a god-level servant, it was at least a top-level god-level servant. Legend has it that the god Kingu led the 11 sons of Tiamat to fight against the Sumer gods. Although the result was a defeat, the fact that the 11 sons of Tiamat could fight against the Sumer gods was enough to show the strength of the 11 sons of Tiamat. If such an existence interfered with the demonic beasts in the north wall, even if there were many servants on the front line, it would be quite difficult to resist. Not to mention that this guy seemed to be quite smart. As for why? Just based on Wuming's encounter with Ulydum in this mountainous region. Wuming wanted to bypass the demonic beasts in the north wall through the southwest mountains and return to Uruk. And these Ulydum happened to ambush Wuming. Obviously, these Ulydum came here in advance. In that case, could Wuming think that these Ulydum were also preparing to bypass the demonic beasts and attack the Uruk? If it was really an irrational demonic beast, it wouldn't choose to go through the mountains. Only in the presence of this Ulydum leader would these Ulydum follow the leader into the mountains. Perhaps it accidentally found Wuming coming out of the fir forest, so the kobold Ulydum chose to ambush him. I don't care what Lachum you are. You just want to hunt me. After Wuming finished speaking, the kobold Ulydum showed a human-like smile, as if admitting that Wuming was right. What a coincidence. I also want to hunt you, Honorable the 11 Sons. Wuming said. The distorted golden 7-headed snake staff emerged from the ripples beside him and fell into Wuming's palm. Wuming's spirit base was Rider, but that didn't stop Wuming from acting as a caster. Roar! The original Ulydum roared. Along with Ulydum's roar, the other mass-produced Ulydum rushed toward Wuming. At that moment, it was as if a sea of red and yellow was about to devour Wuming. Wuming didn't panic. He tapped the 7-headed snake staff on the ground gently, and letter-like special runes covered the ground, which were trampled by the charging Ulydum. Crack! With a crack, the Ulydum closest to Wuming was instantly frozen. Although the ice was very thick, the frozen Ulydum could be seen clearly. For example, the frozen Ulydum closest to Wuming still had a ferocious expression on its face. It was simply lifelike. Whether it was the rippling hair due to running and jumping in the ice, or the unknown shredded flesh between its teeth, Wuming saw it all. Feeling the chill of the ice, some of the unfrozen Ulydum in the rear felt a little afraid and took 2 steps back. But because of the original Ulydum, they didn't dare to run away directly. Even if the minions are strengthened, they are still minions. Silent Wonder tapped the ground with his 7-headed snake staff once more, shattering the ice that sealed Ulydum. Ulydum and the rest of the ice turned into fine powder and scattered on the ground. The ground was covered in a layer of white, without a single trace of blood to be seen. This made the mass-produced Ulidim even more terrified. Some of them even turned around and ran away in fear. But in the next second, these mass-produced Ulidim were smashed into pieces by several other Ulidim that flew out of nowhere. Disgusting purplish-black blood splattered all over the ground, and indistinguishable broken limbs and flesh splattered everywhere. The remaining nerves made some of the flesh move twice, but it soon returned to normal. How cruel! Wuming narrowed his eyes and looked at the kobold Ulidim who had retracted its hand. He clearly saw that the kobold had casually grabbed a few Ulidim around it and threw them at the fleeing Ulidim. It seemed that the kobold didn't treat these mass-produced Ulidim as its own kind, but as tools instead. Roar! The kobold Ulidim roared a few more times, as if reprimanding these Ulidim for being useless. When the remaining Ulidim heard their leader's words, they slowly retreated from the platform. In an instant, only Wuming and the kobold were left on the platform. Chapter 894. Does this mean you want to duel me? Wuming saw through Ulidim's intentions. It wasn't hard to understand. After all, even if the mass-produced Ulidim rushed forward, it would be useless. As expected of the 11 sons of Tiamat. This guy isn't simple. He has some brains. Wuming thought to himself. Moreover, since he still chose to duel Wuming after seeing Wuming's methods, it meant that he was confident in his own strength. Moreover, he didn't show any mercy when dealing with the mass-produced Ulidim that were scared out of their wits. He didn't even treat the mass-produced Ulidim as his own kind and directly captured them as weapons to kill the few mass-produced Ulidim that tried to escape. In addition, this prototype Ulidim brought the mass-produced Ulidim to the southwest mountains. It was very likely that he wanted to bypass the front line of the demonic beasts and go to the Uruk. Such a smart, powerful, and resourceful demonic beast. If this guy was allowed to return to the fir forest, who knew how much damage it would cause to the demonic beast's front line? I can't let him go. This was Wuming's thought at the moment. Coincidentally, Ulidim also had the same thought at the moment. From the beginning, Ulidim commanded the mass-produced Ulidim to ambush and hunt. In fact, he was preparing to devour the traitor of the 11 sons of Tiamat. The cunning kobold Ulidim clearly knew that his compatriot Lachima, Wuming, had betrayed the mother goddess. Hunting Lachima would not only help the mother goddess get rid of a scourge, but it would also strengthen itself by devouring its own kind. Why not? I can't let him go. This was also Ulidim's thought at the moment. A servant and a demonic beast looked at each other. A battle was about to break out. Roar! Ulidim roared. He didn't use any weapons and rushed at Wuming barehanded. It seemed that he was very confident in his physical strength. Wuming, on the other hand, used the Yggdrasil spell on the staff of Anzirgong to test Ulidim. Fire, ice, holy light, darkness, lightning, and even poison. All sorts of magical attacks were unleashed by the staff of Anzirgong, but none of them had any effect on Ulidim. However, no matter what, these spells should have been able to hinder Ulidim for a moment or two. In the end, Ulidim didn't seem to be hindered at all. In the blink of an eye, it had reached Wuming's side and used its sharp claws to viciously swipe at Wuming. Although Tiamat and the 11 beasts were all defeated and killed by Sumer, this didn't mean that the 11 beasts were weak. On the contrary, they were very strong. The 11 sons that Tiamat gave birth to did not possess the authority of a god because they were demonic beasts. They were only born as demonic beasts that far surpassed the Sumer gods in terms of physical strength. They perfectly matched the strength of the demonic beasts born by the gods of creation. The magic of the staff of Anzirgong had no effect on Ulidim, one of the 11 demonic beasts that could fight against the gods. Wuming, who had guessed this result, used the substitute magic of the staff of Anzirgong to block Ulidim's claw attack. Then, Wuming put the staff of Anzirgong aside and let it float beside him. Then, he unhurriedly took out an ancient book from the golden ripples and opened it. It was the nameless spellbook that Wuming hadn't used for a long time. The nameless spellbook recorded all the magic related to YGG-SILL. Logically speaking, it should not have any offensive capabilities. The only reason the Shuayu Mansion's temple could use the power of the Nameless Spellbook to release magic was because the Shuayu Mansion was a silent temple. Therefore, he had a deep understanding of the useless Wu Ming of the Nameless Spellbook. As early as the root, Wu Ming had already transformed the Nameless Spellbook into a spell book that could release the magic recorded in the book. If this was put in the lunar world, it would be the original spell book of the original spell book. In short, it was a super dangerous original spell book. Since Wu Ming wanted to make a cameo appearance as caster, then he would definitely make a good cameo appearance. For example, he would use this spell book. At the moment when Wu Ming took out the spell book, Yulidim, who felt a sense of crisis, quickly retreated and took the initiative to open a distance from Wu Ming. As a magical beast, its beast instinct told it that if it rushed up, it was likely to be injured. It turned out that Yulidim's feeling was not wrong. A wind blade appeared around Wu Ming. It was a penetrating magic that could not be defended against, and its level was naturally the 10th order. Even if Yulidim's physical fitness was high, it would still be afraid when it encountered penetrating damage. "You're quite alert." Wu Ming smiled. Indeed, if Yulidim rushed up just now, it would indeed be injured, or even lose an arm or a leg, so Yulidim and Wu Ming opened a distance. However, Silent Cry's initial goal wasn't to cast a penetrative tier 10 spell, but rather a supreme spell. The penetrative tier 10 spell was just a side dish that came along with it. At the moment when Wu Ming took out the Nameless Spellbook, he activated the plural supreme magic recorded in the Nameless Spellbook and entered the pre-roll. The supreme magic of Yggdrasil was a special skill with a very long pre-roll time. Generally, it was either an ambush in advance or using a Krypton item that could shorten the pre-roll time to achieve the effect of instant activation. The supreme magic recorded in the Nameless Spellbook was not immune to this drawback, and it also had a very long pre-roll time. But coincidentally, Wu Ming happened to have a Krypton item that could shorten the pre-roll time to instant activation. If the Kobold Yulidim had rushed up, Wu Ming would have immediately used the Krypton item, and Yulidim would have been covered by the supreme magic in an instant. But because of the penetrating magic surrounding Wu Ming, Yulidim did not rush up to Wu Ming, so Wu Ming did not activate the Krypton item. At the same time, because supreme magic users did not have any attack power when they were pre-roll, Yulidim was not too worried. It was only a little wary because of the penetrating magic surrounding Wu Ming. Simply put, it did not discover the existence of a supreme magic spell. The reason why the 11 magical beasts could not defeat the gods of Sumer was because they did not have the authority of the gods. In the end, they were defeated and killed by the gods who had the authority of the gods. And the plural supreme magic was comparable to the attack of the gods' authority. What Yulidim did not know was that although it had opened a distance from Wu Ming, it was still within the range of the supreme magic spell. Simply put, Yulidim was already half a step into the kingdom of death. Bang! Chapter 895. Wu Ming suddenly crushed the hourglass-like crystal in his hand. In an instant, extreme energy covered the surroundings with Wu Ming as the center. Sensing the danger, Yulidim's heart trembled. The other mass-produced Yulidim also fled in all directions, but it was all in vain. The white light of destruction covered them all in an instant. With Wu Ming as the center, a thick pillar of light appeared in the entire southwest mountain region. The pillar shot straight into the sky. The entire Mesopotamia shook as if there was a major earthquake. Even the Abith mountain in the northwest was shaken. Although they were demonic beasts, they were still children raised by Mother Earth. At this moment, the earth was angry. Although the demonic beasts that were attacking the north wall didn't panic to the point of running away, they subconsciously stopped their current actions due to the earthquake and stood rooted to the ground. Leonidas I, who was commanding the soldiers, was also shocked by the earthquake. However, he quickly realized that the earthquake wouldn't affect the north wall much. Now. Therefore, Leonidas I took the opportunity to command the soldiers to deal a heavy blow to the demonic beasts that were rooted to the ground due to their instincts. But then, the demonic beasts seemed to have been commanded and retreated one after another. Leonidas and the soldiers weren't surprised. They didn't chase after the demonic beasts. Instead, they cleaned up the battlefield. Rescuing the wounded, retrieving the corpses of the soldiers, cleaning up the wreckage of the demonic beasts, there were still many things to do. What happened over there? After that, Leonidas I looked in the direction of the pillar of light that was still continuing. Leonidas I shook his head silently. As the front line, all he needed to do was to defend. Anyway, King Gilgamesh in the Uruk must have seen it. There was no need for him to worry. Although the pterosaur acted as a carrier pigeon, it's still not as good as the wind demon. Leonidas I muttered to himself. He turned around and joined the ranks of cleaning up the battlefield. Leonidas I was right. The giant pillar of light covered such a wide area and was so powerful that the entire Mesopotamia could see it, not to mention the Uruk. The Uruk people all knelt on the ground. They all thought that God had appeared, and they all prayed devoutly. At the French skylight at the top of the tower, the sage king, Gilgamesh, who had returned from searching for the elixir of immortality for half a year, and the current chief priest, Siduri, stood together at the window and looked towards the southwest. Originally, Siduri had rushed over to report the earthquake to Gilgamesh in a panic. However, under the influence of Gilgamesh's calm aura, Siduri had also become calm. When the earthquake gradually subsided and the pillar of light slowly faded, Gilgamesh finally spoke. Hyunryong's return has already caused such a huge impact. How ostentatious. Upon hearing this, Siduri's face lit up with joy. King Gilgamesh. Are you saying that Lord Hyunryong is back? Siduri was still wondering what made King Gilgamesh put aside his work and observe. It turned out that Lord Hyunryong was back. Since Wuming and Gorgon were both injured, Gorgon was seriously injured and returned to his temple to recuperate, and Wuming directly disappeared. The Uruk people fell into a temporary panic. After that, it was Gilgamesh who spoke again to cheer the people up. The people who had not completely separated themselves from the gods naturally fell into a depression once again because of Hyunryong's return to fight against the enemy. The most serious one was Siduri. As a god who sincerely cared for the people of Mesopotamia, Hyunryong's temple was close to the Uruk and he worked for the people. Later on, he almost replaced the idol Ishtar as the Uruk city god. This made Siduri's devotion to Hyunryong surpass that of most other gods. She was even willing to sacrifice her life for Hyunryong. However, Hyunryong sacrificed himself in the process of fighting against the enemy god and disappeared again. How could this not make Siduri's heart not ache? However, as the chief priest, Siduri could not abandon her duties because of heartache and sadness. Perhaps because Gilgamesh noticed that Hyunryong's departure was a big blow to the Uruk, King Gilgamesh made a new speech to cheer up Siduri and even the entire Uruk people and restore their previous extremely optimistic state. However, this did not mean that Siduri would not be sad about Hyunryong's departure. Almost every few days, Siduri would go to the temple abandoned by Hyunryong to pray. Therefore, Siduri was quite excited when she heard the news of Hyunryong's return. Probably Hyunryong wanted to go from the highlands in the southwest to the Uruk, but he encountered Tiamat's 11 magical beasts and fought with them. As Gilgamesh spoke, he returned to the throne behind him, sat down, picked up the clay tablet, and began to deal with various affairs. My king, should I send someone to welcome Lord Xianlong? Greeting the return of a deity that he had devoutly believed in was something that should be done. Not only that, since Wuming could fight with the enemy in the southwest, it must mean that there were enemies there. Since there were enemies, it was hard to guarantee that there would be reinforcements. In the current situation, if more than half of the 11 sons of Tiamat besieged Hyunryong, there would definitely be an accident. A lot of things had happened in the past 6 months. After Gorgon was seriously injured by Wuming's self-destruction, he had been holed up in his temple in the fir forest all day long. Because of the battle between Hyunryong and Gorgon, the magical beasts produced by Gorgon were basically affected, causing a lot of casualties. The north wall was not attacked for a long time. However, on a certain day 3 months later, a large number of magical beasts flocked to the north wall, and there were 11 magical beast commanders with strength comparable to gods. They called themselves the 11 Sons of Tiamat, and the existence that looked like Enkidu was one of them. If King Gilgamesh did not summon many servants to assassinate the 11 commanders at the cost of sacrificing themselves to buy time for the North Wall, perhaps the North Wall would have been breached by now. Even if Gorgon himself came in person, he would definitely choose to retreat after receiving that attack. Don't worry about Hyunryong, Gilgamesh said while constantly changing the clay tablet in his hand. One by one, he quickly corrected the instructions on the clay tablet. Gilgamesh saw the attack just now. That kind of attack was like the combination of multiple military noble phantoms. Even Gorgon would certainly be injured, let alone the magical beasts. But, Siduri still wanted to say something, but at this time, Gilgamesh put down the clay tablet in his hand and looked up as if he could not stand Siduri anymore. Which servants are there in the south now? Chapter 896. Siduri's veiled face revealed a hint of joy. Judging from King Gilgamesh's words, did he agree to support and welcome Lord Hyunryong back? Yes, my king. Chaldea has just been sent by my king to the southern jungle to support the feathered serpent god. However, before Siduri could finish her sentence, Gilgamesh instantly interrupted her. Then let Chaldea welcome Hyunryong. Moreover, they have formed a bond with Hyunryong. They are the best candidates. After Gilgamesh finished speaking, he once again picked up the clay tablet with his clawed hand. At this moment, there were still many things waiting for him to deal with in Mesopotamia. He couldn't afford to waste a single second. If he delayed any longer, he wouldn't even have time to sleep. Bond? My king, are you referring to the matter of the master of Chaldea possessing Lord Hyunryong's scale? Siduri clearly remembered that when Merlin brought Chaldea and her party to the Uruk, when they approached the shrine of Hyunryong in the Uruk, the girl took out the scale because it was hot and was coincidentally discovered by Siduri. After seeing that the scale was connected to the shrine, Siduri reported the matter to King Gilgamesh. According to the master of Chaldea, the scale was a gift from a friend who had helped them in other singularities. It was said that it would be useful in this singularity. Siduri still remembered King Gilgamesh's reaction at that time. After learning about this matter, King Gilgamesh did not seem to care. However, when he met the master of Chaldea, the first thing he asked was to see the hot dragon scale. He was obviously anxious, but he had to show a calm expression. Siduri did not know what to say about King Gilgamesh. After confirming that it was a dragon scale condensed from Hyunryong's magic, Gilgamesh was very happy to give the master of Chaldea and her followers an extraordinary trial. At that time, Siduri wondered if King Gilgamesh wanted to kill Chaldea and her party. After that, it was said that the people in the Chaldea organization were in an uproar. It would be a joke if they died in the hands of their allies after passing through 6 singularities. However, because of this, Chaldea also confirmed that King Gilgamesh was really a former tyrant. In short, a certain person who sounded like a loser to Siduri had a shadow in her heart. In the end, it was King Gilgamesh's court magician, Merlin, who brought Chaldea and her party back. Under the condition of not touching King Gilgamesh's bottom line, he helped Chaldea and her party a little. This allowed Chaldea and her party to barely pass the trial. This king is especially strict with outsiders who suddenly join because the entire Mesopotamia has become extremely dangerous. Although you barely passed, you completed it with the help of Merlin. This is enough to prove that you are not qualified. You should train in the Uruk for a period of time first, bastards. Siduri wanted to complain. It was King Gilgamesh who was interested in Chaldea and her party because King Hyunryong entrusted them with a dragon scale and went overboard. However, what King Gilgamesh said was true. The current situation in Mesopotamia was extremely dangerous. The strengthened demons and the number of demon commanders that still existed not only made the northern wall miserable, but also made Uruk, the rear of the army, constantly vigilant. One of the 11 sons of Tiamat, a 4-legged serpent-type demon known as Musu Hushio. Half a year ago, when the 11 demon commanders appeared, they led a large number of Musu Hushio to attack Uruk from underground. Because of the sudden attack, they had to sacrifice a servant called Saber, swordsman, summoned by King Gilgamesh to suppress the demons that attacked from the ground. However, the demonic beast commander who personally led the demonic beasts to attack was also killed. In terms of war losses, neither side gained an advantage. The demonic beasts lost an extremely powerful demonic beast commander, and the human side lost an equally powerful servant. Although there were no more incidents of monsters attacking from underground, Gilgamesh still carried out a defense against the monsters underground. In a very short period of time, he successfully developed a powerful barrier called Nabistin's Tooth and buried it under the Uruk. Not only that, King Gilgamesh also carried out a series of defenses against the sky, the two rivers, the Persian Gulf, and even the highlands in the southwest. Even Siduri had to admit that King Gilgamesh was really a genius. But strangely, since the beginning of Mu Xiu Hu Xiu's surprise attack on the Uruk, there were no such monster attacks in the past 6 months. Perhaps they were too cautious, but almost all the monsters attacked from the north. However, King Gilgamesh proposed the possibility of waiting for the humans to relax and then take them down in one fell swoop. Therefore, even if there were no monster attacks, they had to be vigilant in the rear. Therefore, when Gilgamesh said that the master of Chaldea was not qualified, he was not completely looking for an excuse. There was a certain reason behind it. After that, King Gilgamesh arranged the so-called Chaldean embassy for Chaldea's group in the Uruk. He really let them do a variety of things in the Uruk, such as building walls, weeding, feeding livestock, shearing sheep, removing rats in the sewer, and other things that were quite boring but interesting. The significance of this was that Chaldea's master and her followers had successfully integrated into the Uruk. And just yesterday, after Siduri reported the situation of Chaldea's master to King Gilgamesh received information from the Quetzalcoatl through the small pterosaur. A large number of monsters had been discovered in the southern jungles, and there were even signs of monsters coming ashore from the Persian Gulf. However, the monsters had become their own people, and the Quetzalcoatl worked together with Gilgamesh's soldiers to repel them. Although such a situation was rare, monsters would invade from the southwest jungles and the Persian Gulf from time to time. But since it was related to monsters, the Quetzalcoatl would still report it to Gilgamesh. However, Gilgamesh did not pay much attention to it. After all, monsters did try to invade from the south jungles and the Persian Gulf from time to time. Therefore, after realizing that Chaldea's group had enough time to train, Gilgamesh gave them their first mission, which was to support the Quetzalcoatl in the south. However, Gilgamesh understood one thing at this moment. Through the light beam on the southwest plateau today, he could confirm that the monster commanders seemed to be planning something again. However, when he thought about how they had coincidentally bumped into Wuming, Gilgamesh faintly wanted to laugh. This was the so-called coming at the right time. Chapter 897. Didn't Merlin and the servant he brought back also go with Chaldea's people? Use the small pterosaur provided by the Quetzalcoatl to convey the news to Merlin, and let him tell the Chaldea's people that after meeting with Hyunryong, they must listen to Hyunryong's instructions just like this king. Although the Uruk also had carrier pigeons, ever since the Quetzalcoatl turned against them, the Uruk began to use the small communication pterosaur provided by the Quetzalcoatl. It had to be said that this small pterosaur was better than the carrier pigeons in all aspects. That's all. We'll talk about other things when Hyunryong returns to the Uruk. After Gilgamesh finished speaking, he stopped talking and focused on dealing with various matters on the clay tablet. Yes, King, I'll do it right away. Siduri responded and left the throne room. Southern jungle. The hot and humid environment made the group of people who came from the Uruk to support them suffer. Especially Gadatsi, the people accompanying her were either servants or subservants. Only Gadatsi was a pure human. Moreover, the magic concentration in Kanzaki was much higher than in the sixth singularity. If it weren't for the magic dress specially made for Gadatsi by Leonardo da Vinci, perhaps Gadatsi wouldn't be able to move so freely in this singularity. However, even with the magic dress, the magic atmosphere of Kanzaki and the humid tropical jungle still made Gadatsi breathless. Leopard Man, San, haven't we arrived yet? Matthew, who noticed that his senpai was quite uncomfortable at the moment, asked the servant leading them in front, the god Sama who claimed to be the Leopard Man but seemed to be a comedic character. As Matthew understood, this servant looked like an older girl wearing a leopard costume. The item on the ground that looked like a spear was more like a large toy than a weapon. Right away, the leopard man, who was defined as a strange servant by Matthew, turned around and smiled at Matthew rather reluctantly. Matthew was already immune to the leopard man's joking because she said this sentence several times. However, Matthew still noticed that the leopard man's expression was slightly depressed at the moment. Leopard man, San, are you okay? Matthew, who fully displayed his little personality, asked with concern. It's okay, how could the leopard man be frightened by the earthquake just now? Ahahaha, there was no doubt that Miss Leopard Man was frightened. That was what Matthew judged. The appearance of the giant pillar of light caused the earthquake, and at that time, they happened to meet the leopard man outside the jungle who was about to lead them. Because the sudden earthquake was very close to the southern jungle, Gadotsi directly fell to the ground. Matthew barely supported his body to protect Gadotsi, so as to prevent the surrounding trees from collapsing and causing harm to Gadotsi. However, it seemed that the earth and trees in Kanagawa were extremely tough, and there were no signs of trees collapsing or the ground cracking. In the end, the leopard people, who had senses that surpassed that of wild beasts, were the ones who received the most severe effects, to the point of being ridiculously severe. The leopard man was so scared that he buried his head in the ground. Although this ostrich-like behavior was worthy of ridicule, what was more worthy of ridicule was that, burying one's head in the ground should be more affected by the earthquake. After all, it was the earth that was shaking. In short, after the earthquake ended for some time, the leopard man pulled his head out of the ground in a daze, and he looked like he was about to leave. After that, when the leopard man led the way for them, he looked like he was trembling with fear. In short, the leopard man at this moment was very unreliable. Matthew, who understood this, sighed helplessly, but even if they didn't know when they would reach their destination, they still had to go on. Thinking of this, Matthew looked at the cloaked girl who followed them silently behind them, the servant who claimed to be Anna. Anna, who was good at using scythes, didn't panic much during the earthquake. She was almost unaffected by the earthquake. It could only be said that even if she was petite and looked weak, she was still worthy of being called a servant. Subconsciously, Matthew felt that he was still immature. As for the leopard man, Matthew subconsciously ignored her. Miss Anna, do you know where Merlin went? Matthew asked Anna. Originally, as a court magician, Merlin should have stayed in the Uruk temple to serve King Gilgamesh, but under King Gilgamesh's order, May, as a court magician, and Anna followed Gadotsi and Matthew to the southern jungle. As for why Matthew asked Anna this, it was entirely because Merlin told Anna to remember to protect the two of them during the earthquake and quickly left. I don't know, probably he went to the epicenter. Hearing Matthew's question, Anna's purple eyes under the cloak looked at the place where the giant pillar of light appeared before, and no one knew what she was thinking. Seeing this, Matthew also looked at the place where the giant pillar of light appeared before. When Merlin left, he did go in that direction. Probably he really went to investigate the situation. Mr. Merlin is really reliable. Matthew thought so. After that, Matthew saw that Anna didn't answer anymore, so he didn't ask anymore. After all, a good relationship has to be done step by step. On the other side, in the place where the giant pillar of light disappeared, Merlin, unlike Castor, walked quickly in the mountains and jumped to a relatively high mountain. Oh, this is really amazing. Fufu heard the sound of someone wanting to kick someone. Not far from Merlin, there was a huge pit that could be called a basin. This huge pit was the trace of the giant pillar of light. Around the huge pit and even in the center, there was a thick black smoke, but the black smoke was dissipating quickly. If you don't look closely, you won't see it at all. As expected of a Villo, it seems that those magical beasts should have been killed by you. Merlin didn't know who he was talking to, but his tone of praise was a little funny. You mean the kobold? Wuming's figure slowly came out of the smoke. Although he came out of the smoke, Wuming's clothes didn't have the slightest trace of contamination. Merlin judged that Wuming probably wrapped himself with magic to avoid being contaminated by the smoke. But this guy is really strong, worthy of being one of the 11 sons of Tiamat. Merlin, who was looking in the direction of Wuming, slightly widened his eyes. Because behind Wuming, a huge kobold body was following Wuming. No, it wasn't following Wuming. Instead, it was being dragged by Wuming with one hand. Chapter 898. Wuming dragged the blackened world of Warcraft Eulidium with one hand. When he walked out of the smoke, Wuming threw Eulidium heavily. Thump! There was a loud noise, and dust flew everywhere. With Wuming's strength and Eulidium's body weight, a huge crater was created on the ground. As expected of our British silver dragon, Vero. Speaking of which, is he dead? Merlin jumped down from the high ground and walked unhurriedly to the large piece of mixed black flesh. Although I think it should be dead after taking that hit, it's a pity. Wuming shook his head. This guy was still alive. It could only be said that it was worthy of being the original demon born from Tiamat. Its body was so strong that it was able to survive such an attack. Wuming's attack just now was multiple super-level magic, and this guy was still alive. Even if it was a servant, it would not survive such an attack, unless it had a special skill or a special noble artifact. But those mass-produced Eulidium should be dead. If multiple super-level magic couldn't even kill a mass-produced Eulidium, then it would be too cheap. It's not hard to understand why this guy is still alive. This is the so-called prototype. According to King Gilgamesh and my judgment, they are indeed Tiamat's the 11 sons. Merlin poked Eulidium with his staff and told Wuming his information. I've fought with it before, so I'm pretty sure of this. Then, Wuming walked to Eulidium's head and created a weapon with a high-grade item. He was ready to pierce Eulidium's brain through its eyes and kill it completely. Why did you abandon your mission and come to me? The reason Merlin appeared in this place must be because he had a mission. Otherwise, why would a court magician like him come to this border? While Wuming was talking, Eulidium's body shook a little. It was the desire to live. Wait. Wait. If it's not dead, don't kill it. Merlin grabbed Wuming's hand and quickly stopped Wuming's action, saving Eulidium, one of the 11 sons of Tiamat. Eulidium, who was still conscious, heaved a sigh of relief. Thanks to the mother goddess, Eulidium could breathe more air between heaven and earth. It felt like he was in the embrace of the mother goddess. It's Tiamat's son, and it's an existence that can be communicated with. It's a pity to kill it. In other words, Merlin wanted to take Eulidium as a prisoner to obtain information. Let me say this first. I don't think you can get any useful information. Wuming knew what Merlin wanted to do. It was nothing more than to use an illusion to obtain information. However, Wuming didn't think highly of Merlin, or rather, he didn't think highly of the magical beast. Wuming didn't think that this magical beast had any information in its head. The plan of the magical beasts was nothing more than to attack the humans. As the saying goes, counter soldiers with arms, water with an earth weir. Silent Wonder wasn't exaggerating. Since Silent Wonder had returned, he wasn't afraid of not being able to stop the attack of the magical beasts, even if it was a strengthened version of the magical beasts. No, Vilo. A lot has happened in the 6 months you left Uruk. The magical beasts have undergone earth-shattering changes, and they have caused a very serious impact on this world. At that moment, Merlin didn't care about Eulidium's presence. He told Wuming some things. Half a year ago, 11 magical beast commanders who called themselves the 11 Sons of Tiamat appeared. In order to eliminate the magical beast commanders, a magical beast commander attacked the Uruk and killed all his servants. The Sage King summoned new servants and established new defense systems in the sky, rivers, lakes, underground, and so on. Although it was just a general description and didn't explain the details, if the audience was Wuming, they would definitely understand. Don't think that it's easy for you to defeat Eulidium. This is a magical beast comparable to a god-level servant. Wuming was also aware of this fact. Previously, Eulidium had used only his body to resist the multiple supreme-level spells he had cast. Although Eulidium was already half-dead, the fact that he could withstand multiple supreme-level spells without dying was enough to prove his strength as a demon commander. Moreover, The servants summoned by King Gilgamesh basically killed a few magical beast commanders at the cost of 2 to 1 or even 3 to 1. That was why Gilgamesh chose to summon new servants. After all, there was a shortage of manpower. It seemed that the Uruk side was able to eliminate the magical beast commander that attacked the Uruk in a suicidal manner. It could be said that they took a big advantage. However, Wyrm said this. I really didn't mean to underestimate the magical beast commander. He didn't underestimate the magical beast commander. This made Merlin feel very helpless, so Merlin continued to explain. Since the magical beast commander has good wisdom, then we can't treat the magical beasts as beasts. Merlin's implication was that they must treat the other side as a country where soldiers are magical beasts. Since they could capture one of the generals alive, naturally, they couldn't kill it easily. They had to squeeze out the last bit of value before killing it. If this kobold Eulydium knew about this, he would definitely call Merlin a monster. Anyway, I didn't mean to refute you. You can do whatever you want. Shrugging his shoulders, Wyrm walked to the side and removed the weapon in his hand. The weapon turned into blue magic particles and dissipated. Yes, you've helped me a lot, Merlin nodded with a smile, then walked to the front of Eulydium, who had lost the ability to resist. Then, he gently tapped Eulydium's head with his staff. All right, Eulydium of Warcraft, relax. I'll be gentle. I'll take care of you like a dream. Then, Eulydium fell into an illusion that Wyrm could not see. After about a minute or two, Merlin dispelled the hallucinating spell, and the last trace of Eulydium's life force dissipated. What did you do to it? Wyrm glanced at the lifeless Eulydium, then looked at Merlin strangely. Ahahaha, nothing, Merlin laughed proudly, which made Wyrm speechless. It had to be said that in comparison, Merlin was even more ruthless than Wyrm. Anyway, I've already obtained information about the magical beasts. Then, Merlin quietly looked at Wyrm. How about it, Villo? Do you want to hear it? Wyrm snapped his fingers in response to Merlin. Paw! The instant he snapped his fingers, Eulydium's corpse instantly burst into flames. Although Eulydium had said that he wanted to eat Wyrm, Wyrm was not perverted enough to eat Eulydium. However, the sudden burst of flames gave Merlin a fright. Clearly, this was Wyrm's answer to Merlin's question. Okay, calm down, I'll tell you now. As the flames burned, Merlin told him the information he had obtained from Eulydium's mind. Chapter 899. The magical beasts are preparing to attack the north wall and destroy it in one fell swoop. Is that so? Wyrm replied to Merlin unhappily. After all, this didn't seem to be any important information. Not only that, the magical beasts are also preparing to launch a fierce feint attack on humans from the mountains in the northeast, the Persian Gulf in the southeast, and the highlands in the southwest. Depending on the conditions, they will turn the feint attack into their main force. If that's the case, we will be in danger. The strengthened magical beasts posed a great threat to humans. If 2 or 3 people could barely deal with an ordinary magical beast in the past, now it would take nearly 10 people to deal with an ordinary magical beast. Moreover, if it weren't for King Gilgamesh calmly issuing new defense regulations and strengthening the defenses of the North Wall and even other areas, the Uruk wouldn't have been able to hold on for more than half a year. But even so, the North Wall could only barely hold on. It wouldn't be surprising if it was broken through at any time. And if the number of magical beasts was large enough to besiege the Uruk from all directions, the humans in Mesopotamia would be completely finished. Merlin told Wyrm about this analysis and also some details about the magical beasts, reminding Wyrm not to underestimate them. I see, it's already that serious. At this moment, Wyrm had a thorough understanding of the current situation. Wyrm even wondered if Gydia had made some changes to the last singularity. Then, Wyrm realized a problem. Speaking of which, does the commander of the magical beasts want to break the agreement of the 3 goddesses and include the Quetzalcoatl in the attack? Or has the fact that the Quetzalcoatl changed sides been exposed? The mountains in the southwest were adjacent to the forest of the Quetzalcoatl. Even if they went around the edge of the Uruk, they would still be considered to have stepped into the territory of the Quetzalcoatl. However, if they did so, they would be considered to have crossed the border. Therefore, if they wanted to cross the border and attack the Uruk from the southwest, they would have to face the wrath of the Quetzalcoatl. Although the commander of the beasts was at the level of a deity, the Quetzalcoatl was still one of the three goddesses in the alliance, an existence equal to Gorgon. Since they were intelligent, they wouldn't do something so ridiculous. Because the goddess of the underworld is unable to leave the underworld, the magical beast commanders haven't had any designs on her for the time being. I don't know whether the feathered god has been exposed or not, but from Ulydim's memories, the feathered god has indeed been included in their list of targets to be destroyed along with the humans. Through Ulydim's memories, Merlin knew that there would be a new magic beast commander coming to support Ulydim, preparing to annihilate the humans along with the feathered god. As for whether or not the feathered god's betrayal of the three goddesses' alliance was exposed, Merlin had no way of knowing. If the feathered god has to face more than 3 magical beast commanders, I'm afraid it will be difficult for the feathered god to deal with them, Merlin judged. The Quetzalcoatl that appeared in this world was only a servant. Even if it was a servant at the level of a god, it was still a clone. When facing the 11 sons of Tiamat, it was inevitable that it would not be able to do much. It's better not to underestimate the feathered god. Wuming did not think that the feathered god, as the main deity of South America, would be weak. Although Wuming used Enkidu to capture the feathered god at that time, if the feathered god had refused, the result would have been unpredictable. The most important thing was that the feathered god's heart was with the humans. Wuming only told the feathered god the fact that there is still hope for the humans, so the feathered god finally chose to compromise. King Gilgamesh also has great expectations for the feathered god. After the feathered god defected to our side, Gilgamesh let the feathered god expand the scope of the jungle, including the entire south and southwest into the feathered god's jungle. This is to guard against the magical beasts that try to bypass the north wall from the southwest plateau. Letting the feathered god guard the southwest was part of Gilgamesh's defense plan. However, it's better to be cautious. The servants on the human side dared to gamble, but the humans could not afford to gamble at the moment. If they failed, it was likely that they would lose everything. I'll go back to Uruk first and see the king. The current situation was not something that Wuming and Merlin could decide. They had to discuss it with Gilgamesh. By the way, why did you come to the remote border? Merlin didn't answer this question from the beginning. If it wasn't for the fact that Wuming was going to Uruk to find Gilgamesh, he almost forgot to ask Merlin the purpose of coming here. Actually, I accompanied the people of Chaldea to support the feathered god. When Merlin said that, Wuming's eyes lit up. Sure enough, Tachika and the others have arrived. They just arrived in Uruk not long ago. After being trained by King Gilgamesh, they began to carry out the king's first order. And that order was to support the jungle in the south. Sure enough, the speed of time passing is not the same. Wuming said to himself for a while. The speed of time passing was not the same, Wuming already knew that, so Wuming didn't make a fuss about it. If that's the case, then I won't go to Uruk for now. No matter what, he had to meet Gadatsi and the others first. At this moment, a small pterosaur descended from the sky and came to Merlin's side. Oh, is this news from King Gilgamesh? Merlin untied the clay tablet fixed on the small pterosaur's back and handed it to Wuming. It must be related to you, you can take a look first. Indeed, as Merlin guessed, the clay tablet said that Merlin and Chaldea were to find Wuming and meet up with him, and they were to follow Wuming's instructions in the following operation. It's just for you to meet up with me. Wuming didn't read it out loud. After reading it, he crushed the clay tablet. Hey, I haven't read it yet. If King Gilgamesh knows about this, he will definitely blame me. Merlin looked like he was going to suffer. Don't I know you? Your skin is thicker than Chaldea. Wuming's implication was that Gilgamesh's scolding would not affect Merlin, and Merlin would still eat and drink as usual. As expected of my best friend, Vilo, you really understand me, ha. Merlin laughed shamelessly. Let's go find Tachika and the others. Ignoring Merlin, Wuming stepped forward and walked in the direction of the jungle. Not good. Merlin's sudden shout made Wuming turn around helplessly. What's wrong? Because I fell behind halfway, I'm not sure where the destination is. Sorry. Merlin had an apologetic expression, but no matter how Wuming looked at it, Merlin's face was full of annoyance. If I'm not mistaken, it's Eridu. I've been there before, follow me. Thank you so much, as expected of my best friend. Accompanied by Merlin's strange laughter, the two entered the jungle from the opposite direction. Chapter 900. Oh. So this is Eridu. Sure enough, due to the influence of the jungle, everywhere looks like a primeval forest. Merlin, who had followed Wuming to Eridu, exclaimed in surprise. If it's as you said, then the leopard man has already brought Tachika and the others here. They're most likely here. Wuming walked into Eric Metropolis. The people who were working hard to make a living were shocked when they saw Wuming. It's Hyunryong-sama. Hyunryong-sama. Hyunryong-sama has come to Eridu. But I heard that Hyunryong-sama sacrificed himself to fight the demonic beasts, you idiot. Hyunryong-sama is such a powerful person, how could he sacrifice himself for something like that? I told you that's just a rumor. Hyunryong-sama is standing right in front of us. Hyunryong-sama. Ignoring some of the comments, the people of Eridu knelt down and started praying and cheering for Wuming. Wuming didn't stop the people from praying and cheering. Or rather, he couldn't stop them at all. This was the end of the Gods' era, but the end of the Gods' era was still in the Gods' era. Stopping the people from praying, supporting, and cheering for the gods was the same as killing them. Therefore, Wuming didn't try to stop them. After all, everything had to be done step by step. Even if the Gods' era was about to disappear, it was still the same. Wuming nodded at the people who were praying and cheering. He quickly left the place where the people were praying and headed towards the feathered serpent god's temple. You're so popular here, Merlin, who had also caught up with them, said in surprise as he walked beside Wuming. Although Wuming was well liked in Mesopotamia as a Hyunryong, the humans in Ida treated Wuming a little too well. After all, I was the one who pulled the Quetzalcoatl into the alliance. Only then did the Quetzalcoatl promise not to terrorize Eric Metropolis, and you are. They must be very grateful to me for that. Wuming did not think much of it. However, it was precisely because the Quetzalcoatl was no longer terrorizing them that Gilgamesh was relieved to let the Quetzalcoatl manage the southern cities temporarily. Ha ha ha. In that case, the feathered serpent god will become your stepping stone. Wuming only smiled at Merlin's debauchery. Be careful, the feathered serpent god might hear you and give you a wrestling combo. At that moment, Merlin put away his smile and became serious, which was rare for him. However, it was not because Merlin was afraid of the feathered serpent god's wrestling combo, but because Gadazi and the others appeared. Assassin Senior Villo. Gadazi and Mashu looked at Wuming in surprise, they fell into a state of shock. Long time no see, Tachika, Matthew. After leaving the residential area of Idu, Wuming, Merlin, Gadazi, and Matthew went to the special house that the leopard man prepared in advance for Gadazi and the others near the temple of the feathered serpent god. They sat around a stone square table. Originally, Gadazi and Matthew were resting here, but the people working near the temple bustled toward the city center, and while running, they said, Hyunryong-sama is here. After that, the two, who were not familiar with Hyunryong, learned from Roman that Hyunryong was the most mysterious and powerful god among the Sumer gods. Hyunryong should also be a servant. I detected a very dense mana source here, which is probably emitted by Hyunryong. According to my judgment, Hyunryong is probably one of us. The two, who were a little interested in Hyunryong, and Roman proposed to meet this one of us, so Gadazi and Matthew went out of the house to see what Hyunryong looked like. As a result, they didn't see Hyunryong, but they saw an acquaintance. At this moment, Gadazi, who was in a good mood, took the initiative to ask a question, regardless of whether Hyunryong was Hyunryong or not. Assassin, did you come here to help us? How did you come to this singularity? Matthew was also quite curious about this. The Winterwood singularity aside, the American singularity appeared because of Queen Maeve, who held the Holy Grail. And Wuming could appear in the Middle East singularity probably because he should be the same as Bedivere. At this moment, the Villo Senior, who could appear in the Mesopotamia singularity in BC, made Matthew quite curious. It's normal that you don't know. Wuming didn't tell the two about his other identity, and when they met just now, Wuming had left the city center, and there were no citizens praying around him. Gadatsi and Matthew didn't know the identity of Wuming and Hyunryong. Actually, before Wuming could say anything, Merlin rushed to answer. He's a local, it's normal for him to appear here. And Merlin, who rushed to answer, was still playing dumb and keeping them in suspense. Mr. Merlin. What does this mean? Matthew was quite puzzled. Not only Matthew, but Gadatsi was also puzzled. Then, Gadatsi looked at her bracelet. Doctor, do you know what Merlin means? However, Roman, who was in Chaldea, didn't answer. Doctor? Doctor? Mashu also shouted a few words. Is he asleep? Gadatsi guessed. Yes, this is the almighty Leonardo da Vinci. Dr. Roman found it difficult to accept the reality and went to make coffee. Let this genius answer your doubts. Leonardo da Vinci's voice came from the bracelet instead of Roman. According to the test, the magic source that was suspected to be Hyunryong was actually emitted by the Villo. In other words, Dr. Roman's judgment was wrong. Gadatsi and Matthew didn't think there was a problem. However, Wuming, who saw this scene, smiled helplessly. These two little cuties were so natural that they didn't realize the real problem. Merlin, too, burst out laughing at this. What's the problem? Gadatsi was even more puzzled. She felt that what the others were discussing was not the same as what she and Matthew were discussing. In the end, Leonardo da Vinci told Matthew and Gadatsi the correct answer. Tachika, Matthew, it's not that Roman's judgment was wrong, it's because the Villo is Hyunryong. Leonardo da Vinci shut his mouth, Wuming shook his head helplessly, and Merlin also stopped laughing. The whole room was replaced by silence. In other words, the Villo is the mysterious Uruk Hyunryong. Dr. Roman, who came back from making coffee, said in shock. Hey. It could be said that Gadatsi and Matthew finally experienced the feeling when Dr. Roman's mentality exploded. It was worth celebrating. Chapter 901. I'm sorry, I'm really a Uruk Hyunryong. I'm really sorry that I didn't tell you before, Wuming said apologetically. However, Wuming couldn't be blamed. It wasn't something worth bragging about. After interacting with Gadatsi and the rest for a while, Wuming had subconsciously forgotten that they didn't know about his other identities. Wuming had fully proved this point in the American and Middle Eastern singularities. Hyunryong is the most mysterious existence in the Sumer pantheon. He is so mysterious that his real name hasn't been passed down. Only Hyunryong, which is similar to a title, exists. This has led to a lot of rumors about Hyunryong's real name. There are even rumors that Hyunryong is the son of Tiamat, Ramu. Roman, who had returned to his seat, began to explain to everyone the information about Hyunryong recorded in Chaldea. Personally, I don't agree that Hyunryong is the magical beast Rama born by Tiamat, but I'm more inclined to believe that Hyunryong is the son of Tiamat. Roman's voice kept coming from Gadatsi's bracelet. Gadatsi, Matthew, and even Merlin, as well as a petite girl whose face was covered by a hood, all listened silently as if they were listening to a story. According to the records of mythology, Hyunryong was once feared and respected by powerful gods such as Godin, wind god Enlil, and water god Enki. Because Hyunryong's shrine was located in Uruk, even the position of the Uruk city god was occupied by Hyunryong during the late period of the god's era. Wuming, who was listening by the side, had a strange and awkward feeling. Moreover, these sayings were definitely, absolutely, definitely made up by later generations. He had clearly left before Gilgamesh found the elixir of immortality, and he had no intention of competing with Ishtar for the position of the Uruk city god. Many people think that Hyunryong was treated so politely by the gods because of his noble birth. Only the son of Tiamat could be respected by Godin. In addition, Hyunryong did not pass down his real name. Therefore, some people think that Hyunryong's true form should be Tiamat's son, Ramu. But, Doctor, I remember that there are two Ramu, right? Matthew had doubts about this. Indeed, as Matthew said, there are two existences named Ramu in Mesopotamia. One is Ramu, who was also the son of Tiamat, and gave birth to Godin and wind god Enlil. The other is Ramu, one of the 11 magical beasts that Tiamat gave birth to. However, these are just rumors, and the credibility is not high. Looking at Gadotsi and Matthew nodding like students in class, Wuming felt more than a little embarrassed. Not only were they rumors, but they were also completely fabricated by the later generations. Wuming did not interrupt Roman's scientific explanation. He just kept complaining in his heart. Although it is unknown when Hyunryong appeared in the eyes of the people, the period when Hyunryong faded from the eyes of the people was the period when King Gilgamesh was in power. That was the period when the gods gradually disappeared and the era of the gods gradually declined. According to the records, Hyunryong personally destroyed his own temple, hoping that humans would walk the path of breaking away from the gods. Although there were gods who agreed to the separation of humans and gods, their intentions were not strong. Hyunryong could be said to be the only god who took the initiative to strongly advocate for the separation of humans and gods. Wuming nodded silently. Although there was some content in this statement that was fabricated by the later generations, it was generally not much different from Wuming's thoughts. Wuming, who was an outsider, was included in the Sumer divine system. But even so, he was still not a god of Mesopotamia. Wuming, who had strong modern thinking, naturally advocated the separation of humans and gods. Therefore, although Hyunryong was revered by the other gods, there were not many who interacted with him. Hyunryong spent more time with humans, especially the hero King Gilgamesh. It was said that Gilgamesh was taken care of by Hyunryong when he was young. The relationship between the two could be said that Hyunryong was Gilgamesh's adoptive father. Wuming took care of the female Gilgamesh in the parallel world. Although that was the case, after the adjustment of the suppression force, as long as it was a world with the shape of the moon, regardless of whether it was a parallel world or not, there would be myths related to Hyunryong in Mesopotamia. Logically speaking, before Wuming came to this singularity, he had no contact with this male Gilgamesh. But whenever Wuming communicated with him, he felt a sense of familiarity, as if he had really taken care of this singularity before. Senior Vilo is actually King Gilgamesh's adoptive father. Matthew, who understood this, was quite surprised. As for why he was surprised, he was naturally surprised by the sense of strangeness in it. The great silver dragon of Britain, the first knight of the Round Table, was actually the adoptive father of the most ancient hero King Gilgamesh in Mesopotamia. How could it not be strange? Roman also sighed helplessly. The legend of Vilo Saransword, a knight of the Round Table, is that of a dragon who transformed into a human. Now it seems that this is not a legend but a fact. Probably Hyunryong went to ancient Britain after leaving Mesopotamia. This was the only explanation at present. Why don't we ask Assassin? Isn't he right in front of us? Gadotsi looked curiously at Wuming, who was sitting in the most inconspicuous position. Since the person involved was present, why not just ask him? Matthew and Roman, who was now in Chaldea, were both stunned. Because of Wuming's silence at the beginning, coupled with Roman's extensive scientific knowledge, Matthew and Roman had subconsciously forgotten that the person involved was present at the scene. It seems, that is indeed the case. Matthew smiled awkwardly. Yes. Why didn't I think of it? Damn it. Roman's deafening voice made Gadotsi subconsciously move her arm away. Great, it's good that the person involved is present. I really don't understand why the Uruk Hyunryong is a knight of the Round Table Vilo. Sumer turned out to be a knight of the Round Table. This is so strange. Is it really okay for you to be so agitated? Wuming silently complained. You'll die of overwork if you're too conflicted, Roman. Wuming even heard Leonardo da Vinci's nonsensical teasing. How can it be so easy to die of overwork? If it was so easy, I don't know how many times I would have died of overwork. Ignoring the mutual teasing of the Chaldea duo, Matthew looked at Wuming with great seriousness. Senior Villo, what is the truth? Matthew's small eyes sparkled with interest. Ahem. Matthew, you have to know that the reason why mystery is because of its uncertainty and most importantly, confidentiality. Chapter 902. Wuming coughed and pretended to be serious, which made Matthew sit up straight. Ah. Yes, I'm sorry, Villo-senpai, I've offended you. After all, the world of magic was all about concealment and mystery. It was likely that if the truth was exposed, it would have a certain impact on the Villo-senpai. Matthew thoughtfully made up an excuse for Wuming. Only Merlin looked like he wanted to laugh but didn't dare. It seemed that Merlin knew everything. Wuming looked at Merlin as if he was looking at a dead man, as if to say, if you dare to laugh or expose my information, I'll kill you. Anyway, let's talk about my problem later. Speaking of which, where did the feathered serpent god go? And where's the leopard man who brought you here? I don't see him either. We haven't seen the feathered serpent god. Maybe he's not here. As for Miss Leopard Man. Matthew looked cautious, so he was definitely not sure. After the leopard rested for a while, he roared and ran into the forest. The one who spoke was Miss Anna, whose face couldn't be seen clearly. Ah! Miss Anna, I'm sorry, I didn't notice you coming. Matthew was startled by Anna's voice, and he apologized guiltily. It's okay. It seemed that Anna didn't mind it very much. Assassin, let me introduce you. This is Anna, the Anna we met in Winterwood City, but she doesn't remember us. When we met Merlin, Anna was with Merlin. Yo, Anna, long time no see. Wuming greeted her as if they were old friends. Anna nodded silently to the powerful existence who had protected her master, Sakura Madu. Is this singularity Anna the one in Winterwood? It seemed that Gadatsi had thought of Anna as the Anna in Winterwood City from the very beginning. Of course it's Anna. It's not difficult to understand why Anna can appear in this singularity. Firstly, the goddess of magical beasts of the Three Goddesses Alliance was Gorgon, who wielded Tiamat's authority. Secondly, the master of Anna in the Winterwood singularity, Sakura Madu, was sealed in the Holy Grail that Wuming had given to the fake Enkidu. It's not impossible for Anna's master to appear in this world. However, this was difficult for Gadatsi and Matthew to comprehend. After all, they did not have enough information. But, Miss Anna acted as if she didn't know us at all. She didn't talk to us at all. Matthew said weakly. I just hate humans. I didn't mean to avoid talking to you, Anna suddenly interrupted, although her explanation was full of contradictions. By the way, you should know Anna's real name, right? Gadatsi and Matthew exchanged glances and nodded. As expected, Miss Anna is Medusa. Back in Winterwood City, Gadatsi and the others did not interact much with Anna, so they did not get her real name from Anna. However, based on their encounter with Stheno and Euryale in Winterwood City, as well as the way the twin goddesses addressed and treated Anna, Roman guessed Anna's real name through future analysis. At this moment, Anna, who was called by her real name, did not show any emotion. It was as if she was not interested in anything. Do you know that the goddess of magical beasts is Gorgon, who wields Tiamat's authority? Huh? Matthew's exclamation told Wuming that she was indeed unaware of this. Indeed. Although we have some information, it's only a little. Part of the information about the goddess of magical beasts was heard from the civilians, Gadatsi added. Although many people knew that the goddess of magical beasts was Gorgon, the civilians did not have a deep understanding of it. Whether it was Tiamat or the outer gods who wielded Tiamat's authority, as long as it was a goddess who could produce magical beasts, it was Tiamat to them. At most, it was Tiamat who changed her appearance. In short, it was true that the magical beasts that attacked them were produced by the mother goddess. It seems that Merlin hasn't told you yet. With a sigh, Wyrm looked at Merlin. Gadotsi and the others were unlikely to get information from Gilgamesh. After all, he was the most ancient hero king who approached Gadotsi and the others as soon as he came up and immediately arranged for them to undergo training in the Uruk after confirming that they were unqualified. However, if it was Merlin, he should have known about this piece of information. Ahahaha, because King Gilgamesh told me not to disclose any information to Chaldea and the others who were training in the Uruk, I completely forgot about it over time. Merlin laughed and scratched the back of his head proudly. In short, let's analyze the current situation now. The scientific meeting immediately turned into an intelligence meeting, and Roman also abdicated his position and stopped talking. The three goddesses alliance is the goddess of the underworld in Mesopotamia, the Quetzalcoatl in Central and South America, and the Greek goddess of monsters Gorgon who holds Tiamat's authority. Gadotsi and Mashu nodded. They were not surprised. It seemed that this was part of the information they had. The Quetzalcoatl was betrayed by me, and the goddess of the underworld can't leave the ground. The biggest threat is the goddess of monsters, Gorgon who holds Tiamat's authority. In the face of this biggest threat, my last spiritual base attempted to perish together with Gorgon's spiritual base, but unfortunately, the fake Enkidu came and stopped it. However, Wyrm was more concerned about the fact that Gorgon, who was seriously injured at that time, recovered slowly and effectively. Was it the influence of Tiamat's authority, or something else? While Wyrm paused to think, Matthew raised his small hand and began to ask questions. That. Senior Villo, what do you mean by the spiritual base last time? After all, I'm Hyunryong from Mesopotamia. When a singularity appeared in Mesopotamia, I naturally came back to take a look. By the way, I appeared in Uruk one step earlier than Merlin. Yes. But it's a pity that Hyunryong, who appeared in Uruk one step earlier than me, left early last time, and he didn't even manage to perish together with me. What a pity. In response to Merlin's whispering, Wyrm responded with a murderous glare. However, in Matthew's view, this scene was indeed a quarrel between friends. By the way, it's a great fate that Mr. Merlin and Senior Villo can meet in Uruk. The two of them were both subjects of King Arthur in Britain, and now they met in Uruk as subjects of King Gilgamesh. It was indeed a great fate. But in the end, whether it's in Britain or in Mesopotamia, I'm a level higher than Merlin. Wyrm smiled proudly at Merlin. Thinking about it carefully, that's true. Gadotsi thought for a moment and nodded. In Britain, although Wyrm and Merlin were both subjects of King Arthur, as the closest subjects of King Arthur, their status was not lower than Merlin's, and even higher. The difference was even greater in Uruk. Previously, Dr. Roman said that Hyunryong in Uruk is equivalent to King Gilgamesh's adoptive father, while Merlin was only King Gilgamesh's court magician. Although it wasn't a crushing victory, no matter how you looked at it, Wyrm was superior to Merlin. Ha ha ha. You're still so merciless, my dear friend. Chapter 903. I think you've forgotten the pain after the scar has healed. In the past, Merlin had been taught a lesson by Wyrm several times because of his excessive teasing. Perhaps it was a symbolic lesson that caused Merlin to become even worse. However, Wyrm was too lazy to refute Merlin. It is said that the Knight of the Round Table Villo and the great wizard Merlin are close friends. It seems that it is true. Regarding friends, Wyrm had to admit that Merlin was possibly, a friend of his for the time being. Wyrm knew Merlin during the period of King Uci. He also participated in the plan to create the Red Dragon bloodline. Although Merlin was sometimes disdainful, Wyrm and Merlin had indeed become friends. That's right, Villo and I. No, I have to say Hyunryong now. Lord Hyunryong and I are indeed good friends, ha ha ha. Sure enough, if you give Merlin some face, he would be able to open a dye house. It's just Merlin. Breathe with gills in the future. Wyrm directly gave Merlin a dead fish's eye. What the hell do you mean by breathing with gills, and my name is Merlin. Merlin, not Merman. Merlin waved his staff to express his dissatisfaction, but Wuming turned a blind eye. Sure enough, you two have a good relationship just like Matthew and me. Seeing this scene, Godatsi smiled and immediately hugged Matthew. Say. Senior, please don't be like this, pft. Miss Anna, who was alone, couldn't help but make a sound. Aw. Even I want to have a good chat with my best friend. Roman from Chaldea also made a sound of dissatisfaction. Oh, if I remember correctly, Romani is someone who doesn't have that kind of beautiful existence. Damn it. Leonardo da Vinci. Don't expose me. It was about time for the farce to end. At this moment, Wuming coughed. Let's talk about my best friend later. Let's continue our conversation. Wuming knocked on the table, and a 3D map projection appeared in front of everyone. This was a map made by Wuming using magic. The mountains, plains, hills, and so on were clearly visible on the map. Even the Uruk and other cities were depicted very realistically, like a high-quality model. Oh! That's amazing! Godatsi's clear eyes reflected the projected map, and she exclaimed in surprise. The Quetzalcoatl is on our side, and the goddess of the underworld can't leave the underworld, so we don't have to worry about it for now. The original goddess of magical beasts was also severely injured when I left last time. It stands to reason that the situation at this moment shouldn't be so serious. Then, Merlin continued Wuming's words. Hyunryong's departure last time caused heavy damage to Gorgon, and countless magical beasts were also affected by the aftermath of the battle between Hyunryong and Gorgon. But 3 months ago, for some reason, a large number of strengthened magical beasts poured out of the fir forest. Not only did their physical fitness and size increase, but there were also new types of magical beasts. A large number of new magical beasts and strengthened magical beasts attacked the north wall and caused heavy damage to the north wall. Merlin recalled the reports from the front line and narrated little by little. These words were not only for Godatsi, but also for Wuming who didn't know about these things. Then, 11 magical beasts commanders who claimed to be the sons of Tiamat appeared on the magical beasts front. That night, Mu Xiu Hu Xiu led a large number of mass-produced magical beasts to raid the Uruk from the underground. Our side suffered heavy losses, and nearly 1/3 of the total population of the Uruk were killed. In the end, one of the magical beasts' commanders, Mu Xiu Hu Xiu, was killed at the cost of sacrificing a servant. Many mass-produced magical beasts were beheaded. Godatsi and Matthew's expressions were slightly hazy after Merlin's words. All of this was seen by Wuming's eyes. Perhaps Godatsi and Matthew had learned from the Uruk survivors about the Uruk disaster 3 months ago. There should be many relatives of the victims among them. Godatsi and Matthew were extremely emotional. Perhaps both of them didn't feel good when they communicated with the relatives of the victims. Sure enough, even after experiencing 6 singularities, the ordinary human Godatsi and the pure Matthew still couldn't get used to sacrifice. Wuming walked behind Godatsi and Matthew, then stretched out his hand and rubbed their little heads. Don't worry, I wasn't there back then. Now that I'm back in the Uruk, I won't allow anyone to sacrifice themselves. This is the promise that Winterwood's assassin made to you, and it's also the agreement that the Knight of the Round Table Villo made with you. At the same time, this is also my promise to the people in the land of Mesopotamia who pray to the gods and believe in Hyunryong as a Uruk. Godatsi and Matthew were still in a daze at this moment, as if they couldn't react to Wuming's words. But it had to be said that Wuming's words did play a big role in comforting the two. At the very least, their expressions were no longer hazy, and they were full of energy again. Yeah. Assassin, I'll remember. Yes. Senior Villo, it's a promise. On the side, Anna, who saw this scene, was thinking about something, and at the same time, it attracted Wuming's attention. Anna, since I brought Sakura here, then I will be responsible for taking Sakura back. This is also my agreement with you. As you wish. However, the action of tightening the hood again to cover her face showed that Anna's heart was also fluctuating at this moment. Gadazi and Matthew were confused by the conversation between Wuming and Anna. However, before Wuming could explain, Merlin, who breathed through his gills, broke the beautiful atmosphere. Okay, can you let me continue? Everyone looked at Merlin with murderous eyes. Not only that, but Chaldea's Roman also scolded him. Merlin, you bastard, you really don't know how to read the atmosphere. You're as bad as the records say, damn it. Roman, who had been monitoring the situation in Chaldea's control room, was originally relieved. After all, Gadazi's happy mood was still helpful for Gadazi's safety. After all, there was a risk when humans performed ray shift, and they might completely disappear into the past. Along the way from the 6 singularities, Roman had been using equipment to monitor Gadazi's physical condition. It turned out that a happy mood was beneficial for Gadazi's safety. However, Gadazi and Matthew understood Merlin very well. Forget it, Doctor. After all, Mr. Merlin is right. It was originally a meeting to share information. Even if Merlin didn't understand the atmosphere and interrupted, it was reasonable to say that there was nothing wrong. Moreover, there was a reason why Merlin had interjected, because the next topic will be even crueler, so be mentally prepared in advance. Chapter 904. King Gilgamesh, who was deeply aware of the seriousness of the demonic beast commander, resummoned 7 servants and made a plan with the newly summoned servants to attract and disperse the enemy. Together with the remaining servants of the previous summons, a total of 10 servants were dispatched to launch a decapitation operation on the demonic beast commander. 10 servants? Matthew and Gadazi were really shocked. After all, the number of servants was indeed too many. Although Gadazi and Mashu did encounter a lot of servants in the first few singularities, those servants were either alone or in small groups. At most, Gadazi could gather a lot of servants around himself with his master's identity. But in this singularity, King Gilgamesh, as a human in the singularity, had 10 servants under his command. How could this not be shocking? So that's why King Gilgamesh is sitting in Uruk as a magician. Roman from Chaldea also made a reasonable judgment on the posture of the sage king. It was because of the need to command the people that the hero king became the sage king. It was because of the need to summon servants to resist the demonic beasts that Gilgamesh changed from a warrior to a magician. So, the supply of magic for so many servants is supported by King Gilgamesh alone? Matthew's question made Gadazi aware of the problem. After the growth of 6 singularities, Gadazi also had a lot of understanding of the servant's contract and the supply of magic. Gadazi was able to form a contract with many servants because of the magic support behind Chaldea. If it was really relying on Gadazi to provide magic alone, as an ordinary human, she was afraid that she could not even support Matthew to fight. However, this was not Chaldea, but Mesopotamia in BC, and Gilgamesh did not have the magic support behind Chaldea like Gadazi. In that case, the magic needed to form a contract with so many servants was all provided by Gilgamesh alone. Indeed, assuming that the servants rely on food to replenish their magic, and Gil only provides the magic to maintain the contract, that is quite a large amount of magic power. When Gilgamesh was suggested by Wuming to summon servants, he proposed that the magic source should be solved by Wuming, because Wuming was worried that providing a large amount of magic to the servants would overwhelm Gilgamesh. However, Wuming's proposal was rejected by Gilgamesh, coupled with the fact that Gilgamesh summoned new servants. The burden on him was not something that ordinary people could bear. King Gilgamesh is so great, I thought he was just a bad-tempered tyrant. Gadazi scratched the back of her head embarrassedly. Ha, if King Gilgamesh heard it, I'm afraid he would praise you for your honesty. After all, the gift that King Gilgamesh gave you was really rough. At that time, the trial that King Gilgamesh gave to Gadazi really scared her. At that time, Gadazi's face changed color. It was no wonder that Gadazi had a bad impression of King Gilgamesh. No one would have a good impression of a guy who almost killed them when they first met, and Gadazi was the same. However, listening to Merlin's words, Gadazi's view of Gilgamesh has greatly changed. Gil won't care about your opinion of him, especially the current sage king, don't think too much about it. Wuming rubbed Gadazi's head and comforted her. I know. Gadatsi's cheeks were slightly red. Even after experiencing 6 singularities, Gadatsi was still an immature and cute little girl. Then, Wuming looked at Merlin and restarted the topic. If I didn't guess wrong, the result should not be ideal. That's right. We sacrificed 8 servants to kill 3 demonic beast commanders. Sacrificed 8 servants? Matthew's eyes widened. Only 3 demonic beast commanders. Gadatsi couldn't help but stand up and hit Wuming behind her. This result is too unsatisfactory. Chaldea's Roman couldn't help but make a helpless sound. Even Leonardo da Vinci, who was always smiling, couldn't smile at this moment. In addition to Merlin and Wuming, who proposed that the result was not ideal, only Anna didn't have any emotional or physical fluctuations, but Anna's heart was probably not calm at this moment. Including the one that was sacrificed in the Uruk, the result was that a total of 9 servants were sacrificed, but only 4 demonic beast commanders were killed, and there were still 6 demonic beast commanders alive. Even so, there should be more than 2 servants in the Uruk. Wuming asked again. Huh? Gadatsi and Matthew were stunned again. The result is so miserable because Merlin deliberately said that to let you hear it. As Merlin said before, the next topic will be more cruel. In short, Merlin did it deliberately. As Wuming spoke, he glanced at Merlin, who was wearing a mischievous smile. And there's one thing I'm sure of. Merlin definitely won't participate in the decapitation operation, so he won't be one of the surviving servants. In that case, the number of servants left in Uruk must be more than 2 mounts. And since there were more than 2 servants left, how could there be only 3 servants left? There must be more than that. Ha ha ha, well said, you are indeed my best friend. At this moment, there are still 10 servants left on the human side. There are still 10 servants left. This number is very optimistic for the current situation. This time, it was Roman's voice. Roman is right, after all, there are only 7 servants in the ordinary Holy Grail war. Wuming said in agreement. Then, Wuming looked at Merlin again. But you should have counted me, Merlin. Of course, after all, you are indeed a servant on our side, aren't you? Sure enough, Merlin was still the strongest when it came to trickery. Matthew and Gadatsi looked at each other. If that was the case, it was really bad. Perhaps Matthew, Anna, and even the leopard man were also included. But it seemed that Merlin was right. In short, let's talk about the remaining servants in addition to the few of you here. As the saying goes, know yourself and know your enemy, and you will never be defeated. First of all, one must know yourself. In addition to you, me, Matthew, and Anna, there are Quetzalcoatl, Leopard Man, Leonidas I, who is in charge of defense in the North Wall, Nawakamaru and Musasobo Benkei, who are in the Uruk under the command of King Gilgamesh, and the last one, Zhuge Kongming. Zhuge Kongming. Chapter 905. Mr. Merlin, are you talking about Zhuge Kongming? Is it the military advisor from ancient China? Gadatsi and Matthew asked Merlin. Yes, it is the military advisor of the Shu Kingdom in ancient China, Zhuge Kongming. And the defense plan for the Uruk and the surrounding areas that were not invaded by the demonic beasts was discussed by King Gilgamesh and Zhuge Kongming. After thinking about it carefully, it was indeed a reasonable explanation. After all, if it was really all up to King Gilgamesh, and he had to think about so many problems, he might really die from overwork. I heard that the military advisor had been guarding the Shu Kingdom until his death, not letting it be annexed by the powerful Wei Kingdom. It seems that Mr. Kongming is quite good at defense. In Matthew's view, being able to resist the demonic beasts in a situation where the human forces were so weak, and the people in the Mesopotamia could survive and even live in peace and contentment, not only highlighted the military advisor's resourcefulness, but also reflected the military advisor's achievements in guarding the Shu Kingdom until his death. Having said that, don't forget about the king of the Uruk who wanted to carry the world on his back, Matthew. Maybe Zhuge Kongming did play a big role, but Gilgamesh's role was certainly not less than Zhuge Kongming's. Villo Sr. is right. To be able to summon so many servants to resist the demonic beasts and establish the North Wall, King Gilgamesh is indeed not as good as Zhuge Kongming. It was not an exaggeration. In Wu Ming's view, even without Zhuge Kongming, Gilgamesh could still resist the attack of the demonic beasts and still ensure that the people under his rule could live in peace and contentment. But the price may be accelerated to death from overwork. By the way, we also met Zhuge Kongming when we were in the Winterwood Singularity. Do you remember Assassin? I don't know if it's the same person. Gadotsi thought of the Zhuge Kongming who used the modern magician's body in the Winterwood Singularity. Maybe it's the real Zhuge Kongming, Sr. Matthew also discussed with Gadotsi. However, whether it was the pseudo-servant Zhuge Kongming or the real servant Zhuge Kongming, they were the same person, just different in appearance. Mr. Merlin, what kind of person is Zhuge Kongming? Matthew turned to look at Merlin. As the court magician of King Gilgamesh, Merlin should know the situation of Zhuge Kongming. Unfortunately, I only know that Zhuge Kongming is a person wearing a China-style robe. Because I was often asked to run errands by King Gilgamesh, I didn't have much contact with Zhuge Kongming. To put it simply, Merlin didn't know who was in Castor's team. So. Matthew nodded, indicating that he understood. Since it's a China-style robe, it's probably the real Zhuge Kongming. Gadotsi judged. Maybe there will be a situation like Matthew. Wu Ming interjected. Last time, Zhuge Kongming hid Emilo-Tu's consciousness and used Emilo-Tu's body, clothes, and habits. However, a pseudo-servant could also let the original personality of the body dominate the body. Although Matthew was not a pseudo-servant, Matthew's identity was a subservient, which had the same effect as a pseudo-servant. When Matthew used the power of Galahad, the clothes on his body would turn into purple armor. Therefore, it was also possible that Emilo-Tu would wear Zhuge Kongming's clothes. Then, Wu Ming thought of the leopard man. By the way, the leopard man here may be the same, but the situation may be completely opposite. Wu Ming didn't realize it before, but thinking about it carefully, Wu Ming did see that face in Ilya's world. Huh? Miss Leopard Man is also a pseudo-servant. Vilo Sr. means that Miss Leopard Man is a god on the inside, and the appearance is a human on the outside? Although they were shocked, Matthew and Gadotsi recalled the Leopard Man's doll-like appearance, and they couldn't help but believe Wu Ming's words. Although Dr. Roman did prove that the Leopard Man was a divine servant, no matter how he looked at it, it was impossible for there to be a god with such a funny appearance. Sure enough, it was caused by a spirit base similar to a pseudo-servant. But the Leopard Man's situation is not enough to reach the point of pseudo-servant. The Leopard Man's bestiality is too serious, and there is almost no humanity. At most, it can only be a slight pseudo-servant. Okay, although I don't want to interrupt you, first of all, you have to know that I don't have the slightest combat power. Huh? How come? Merlin's words made Gadotsi and Matthew show surprised and disappointed expressions. Zhuge Kongming's horror is not his combat power, but his wisdom. As for Merlin. Wu Ming looked at Merlin, who looked at him with expectation and trust. Even Merlin wouldn't make such a joke at this moment. Merlin probably has his own reasons. Merlin doesn't count as combat power. Ha ha ha, although Mafa Merlin had been ridiculed by Mafa Merlin, he was still very happy. Regarding the current situation, Gadotsi and Mashu whispered to each other. I feel that Mr. Merlin is so pitiful. It turns out that Mashu also thinks so. At this moment, the current meeting was almost over, and Wu Ming also spoke at the last moment. In short, since the military advisor is in the Uruk, no matter how bad the situation is, the Uruk will probably be fine. Wu Ming said with a kind smile. Looking at Wu Ming's kind smile, Gadotsi, Matthew, and even Anna felt a chill down their spines. In other words, we can be bolder. When Wu Ming said this, Gadotsi and the others felt even more chills down their spines. So, Lord Hyunryong, what new plan do you have? Merlin also looked at Wu Ming with a smile, but at this moment, Merlin's smile was more and more similar to Wu Ming's in the eyes of Gadotsi and the others. It wasn't unreasonable for these two guys to be best friends. This was the so-called birds of a feather flock together. Let's go and conquer the useless Venus goddess. Ah! Chapter 906. Northwest of Mesopotamia, at the foot of Mount Abith, where the mountain range stretched out continuously. Black and purple ripples suddenly appeared here. Then, like carps jumping out of the water, one figure after another jumped out of the black and purple ripples and stood firmly on the ground. There was a black-haired, red-eyed youth wearing the common male clothing of this era, a white-haired nightmare holding a wooden staff, an orange-haired girl with a single ponytail wearing a special magic dress, and a cute girl wearing a slightly revealing purple armor with one of her eyes covered by a fringe. The newcomers were Wyrm, Merlin, and the slightly reluctant Gadotsi and Matthew. The four of them all arrived at the foot of Mount Abith. Is it really okay for us to leave Miss Anna there like this? Matthew, who had his feet on the ground, was the first to speak uneasily and slightly embarrassed. It's okay, Matthew. This is also Anna's idea. Wyrm was right. This was indeed Anna's idea. Previously, when Wyrm was prepared to bring Gadotsi and the others to cause trouble, to attack the Venus goddess, Anna expressed that she was not interested in it. She would rather stay and help clear out the monsters in the surrounding area. After all, Wyrm was not an unreasonable person. Since Anna had volunteered to stay, Wyrm did not ask the others and agreed like a dictator. Don't forget that we received King Gilgamesh's order to support the feathered serpent god. Leaving one of us there means that we have indeed played a role and completed the mission. Also, we can inform the feathered serpent god and the leopard man that we have temporarily left. Moreover, Anna was the one who suggested it. This is killing 3 birds with 1 stone, Merlin explained. But, if we do this half-heartedly, is it really okay for us to complete King Gilgamesh's mission? Will it ruin King Gilgamesh's plan? Not only was Matthew worried about this, but so was Gadotsi. Matthew is right. Sigh, I don't want to be given another trial by King Gilgamesh when I go back. Gadotsi said as her face turned pale, as if she was recalling the life and death trial. Facts had proven that even if one's perception of a person changed, the fear of that person would not disappear in a short time. Don't worry. If anything happens, I'll take care of it. Wyrm walked to the 2 of them and patted their heads. His tone was rather confident. Anyway, Gilgamesh had asked the pterosaur to send over the clay tablet that Gadotsi and the others had to listen to his commands after meeting him. Wasn't it Wyrm's order to capture the Venus goddess? Gadotsi and the others were indeed listening to Wyrm's order, so Gilgamesh wouldn't blame Gadotsi and the others. Everything would be taken care of by Wyrm. Senior Villo, I think we should be more cautious. After all, there are still 6 commanders among the demonic beasts. I'm a little worried about Anna alone, worried that Anna will be in danger alone. Wyrm guessed and continued Matthew's words. Matthew nodded. After all, the demonic beast commander is an existence that requires multiple servants to defeat, and it's a way to perish together. Gadotsi also said. It was normal for Gadotsi and Matthew to be worried. The data was clearly there. Seeing this, Merlin had to stand up and boost their morale. Don't worry, Matthew, Tachika, the reason why there is a data of multiple servants perishing together to kill the demonic beast commander is entirely because of the situation. This was because of Wyrm's attention. After all, Wyrm wasn't very clear about the specific content of it. What do you mean by this? At that moment, they didn't move toward the Abiv mountain, but they found a place to sit and sat down. One of the demonic beast commanders, Muhushio, appeared from the Uruk underground and attacked the Uruk. He didn't cause much damage to the Uruk, and he was completely killed by his own pride. After all, Gilgamesh was in charge of the Uruk, and there were many servants. A single demonic beast commander couldn't set off a storm in the Uruk at that time. At the same time when Merlin paused, Matthew, who was like a student listening to a lecture, raised his hand. But, Mr. Merlin, you said that at that time, a servant was sacrificed to kill the demonic beast commander, and nearly 1/3 of the population in the Uruk city was killed. However, Merlin shook his head. The so-called sacrificed servant was Okita Soki, who was a saber. Okita Soki was seriously injured after the war, but he didn't die. He would recover completely after a few days of rest. However, Okita Soki's skill, frail, was activated at that time. At this point, Merlin paused and did not continue. However, even if Merlin had said this, everyone more or less understood. Don't tell me. Matthew looked inconceivable. Don't tell me. Godatsu's whole face was filled with an inconceivable expression. It can't be, right? Wu Ming remembered that when Okita Soki was first summoned, he did spit out blood. And from the name of the skill, frail, it could be said that the effect of the skill was obvious. Yes, because of the activation of frail, although the injury was serious but not fatal, it directly became a fatal injury. The most fatal injury to a servant was the broken spirit core, and that was the end of the servant's life. This. Roman, who was in the Chaldea control room, was stunned. He even stopped recording what happened in the singularity. It was completely unimaginable that there would be a servant who was forced to leave because of a skill. As a genius, this is the first time I've heard of such a situation. However, if it's the Okita Soki who was tortured by illness, it's indeed possible. Da Vinci calmly analyzed the situation. The skill, frail, can turn a serious injury into a fatal injury. It seems that the level of the skill is not low. It should be above B class, maybe it has reached A class. Moreover, perhaps Saber's luck value was not high. Listening to Leonardo da Vinci's voice through Godatsu's wrist, Wu Ming silently complained in his heart. Only a low luck value could explain this. Otherwise, how could Miss Okita encounter such an incredible thing? Chapter 907. Pft. Cough cough. In short, all of these are coincidences within coincidences, the result of coincidences within coincidences. Merlin, who could not hold back his laughter, immediately covered up for himself. Godatsu and the others did not pay attention to Merlin's fleeting laughter. They were still puzzled by the fact that a servant would die under their own skills. Although according to what Merlin said, it is indeed similar to mutual destruction, but you actually deliberately exaggerated it. This once again confirmed Merlin's previous words. The next topic will be more cruel, so be prepared in advance. In short, it was still Merlin's bad taste. Wu Ming shook his head and stopped thinking about these things. The reason why a servant and Mu Xiao and Hu Xiao, mutual destruction, was figured out, then, the next thing was, so, why did 8 of the 10 servants who carried out the decapitation operation, and only 2 of them came back? That was the main point. The decapitation operation carried out by the 10 servants could be said to be very successful, and it was not as bad as you think. For the result of the decapitation operation, Merlin thought that it was already very good. Although because of the plan of King Gilgamesh and Zhuge Kongming, the demonic beast commanders were temporarily separated, but even if there is only one demonic beast commander, there are demonic beasts everywhere around it. And to complete the decapitation operation, meant that they must go deep into the demonic beast group, and because of King Gilgamesh's magical burden, the servants he summoned were not first-class servants, and it was impossible for them to besiege one demonic beast commander with 10 servants. Not to mention that the efficiency was not high, and it was bound to alert the other demonic beast commanders. In case the other demonic beast commanders noticed the problem and gathered together, then they really couldn't do anything. It is basically impossible to get close to the demonic beast commander when the 10 servants are separated. It is basically impossible to kill the commander and retreat while surrounded by so many demonic beasts. Even if it was second-rate or third-rate servants, if 2 or 3 servants fought together, it was still possible to kill a demonic beast commander. The fact also proved that this idea was indeed feasible, 8 servants in exchange for the death of 3 demonic beast commanders. And to put it bluntly, demonic beast commanders seemed to be unable to be mass-produced, and King Gilgamesh could summon servants again as long as he could hold on, although he probably won't do that again. In the end, there were 2 servants that returned to Uruk alive. For a one-way decapitation mission, it was a pleasant surprise that a servant could come back alive. After sacrificing the lives of 3 demon commanders, 2 followers came back alive. Based on this operation decapitation alone, it's already an excellent result. Merlin was very optimistic about this. How could this be? Matthew was shocked. Isn't this a suicide squad? Gadotsi vividly interpreted the essence of the beheading operation. Indeed, King Gilgamesh didn't expect the 10 servants to come back alive. King Gilgamesh assigned this task with the consent of the servants, and they were also very willing to serve as a suicide squad in order to give hope and a future for mankind. Merlin said the truth indifferently. This is too cruel. Matthew's eyes were full of sadness again. Although it was cruel, Matthew really couldn't refute it. Was this the so-called necessary sacrifice? Humans couldn't deal with demonic beast commanders, only servants could, and combined with the situation at that time, they could only send servants to the depths of the demonic beasts to carry out the decapitation operation. However, even so, in the face of another sacrifice, Matthew still couldn't look at this problem calmly. Matthew, in a war, anyone's sacrifice is just a number. This is the essence of war. In the past, he, Artoria, and many knights of the Round Table, led countless knights to fight in the north and south, and it could be said that he had already seen through the essence of war. But, in this war between the demonic beasts and the humans, even if the servants sacrificed themselves, as long as their sacrifice created the conditions for the humans to win in the future, then their sacrifice was not in vain. Just like the servants who sacrificed themselves for you in the previous 6 singularities, we should remember them and work harder for the next operation. We can't let their sacrifice go to waste. Merlin is right, the original 11 demonic beast commanders have now been reduced to 6, but there are still 10 servants on the human side. The scale of victory is gradually tilting to our side. At this time, we should work harder. How can we be depressed because of the servant's sacrifice? Yes, Vilo-senpai, I'm still recovering, sorry. Matthew patted his cheek and recovered again. Because of his incomparable emotional state, Matthew's mood recovered quickly after the training of 6 singularities. However, at this time, Gadotsi noticed some problems. Wait a minute, why are there still 6 demonic beast commanders left? Didn't we defeat 4 in total? It stands to reason that there should be 7 demonic beast commanders left, right? This was something that Matthew didn't notice. Gadotsi counted his fingers and thought to himself, could it be that he had miscalculated? This is my negligence. When I came here before, I encountered a demonic beast commander and killed it, so there are 6 demonic beast commanders left. Indeed, only Wuming and Merlin knew about the death of the prototype Ulidim. After that, the 2 of them didn't talk about it, so it was normal that Gadotsi didn't know about it. Wait a minute, was the previous light beam caused by Vilo? Roman's incomparably shocked voice came from Gadotsi's bracelet, and Wuming could imagine Roman's expression at the moment. That guy was different from the other demonic beasts, so I paid a little attention to it, but I overdid it. Wuming smiled a little embarrassedly. Gadotsi, Matthew, Roman, and Leonardo da Vinci fell into a state of shock. Ha ha ha, Lord Hyunryong overdid it a little, but it's very scary. Only Merlin smiled at the side. Forget it, the Knights of the Round Table can be Uruk Hyunryong, so it's not surprising that you can kill a demonic beast commander alone. It's not alone. That Ulidim has quite a few mass-produced Ulidim by its side. Although Wuming really didn't care about them, they were indeed destroyed by the aftermath of Wuming's attack. Sure enough, Senior Vilo is really strong. I think so too, Matthew. The conversation between the two had other meanings, and Wuming was still a little unaware. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.